Welcome everyone to this first Archer Symposium titled Telling Our Immigrant Stories. My name is Roxana Kazan and I serve as Archer's Executive Director. As many of you already know, at Archer we strive to educate the public on a variety of issues pertaining to the wide umbrella of social justice and human rights. We value equity and belonging for all human beings, and we strive to contribute as allies to the authentic inclusion of historically underrepresented communities. While Archer was started by a group of Romanian Americans, we do not serve only the Romanian diaspora in the United States. We believe that as responsible global citizens, we must be concerned with the well-being of all diasporas and all individuals, no matter their ethnic roots. However, culturally speaking, many of us who identify as Romanian American utilize our cultural backgrounds in building these bridges of allyship. Ultimately, we strive to emulate the rights and responsibilities of individuals living in a multicultural society. We are particularly inspired by the younger generations, and through our various activities so far, we try to highlight their wisdom, perseverance, kindness, and inclusivity. Telling our immigrant stories intends to highlight the power that we have together to make stories audible. Being an artist or a writer these days can be challenging, as we all know. So we wanted to offer a launching platform for students who want to contribute to Archer's mission from an artistic perspective. Today, we are gathered here to celebrate their work and their passion, not only by revealing the contest awards, but also by encouraging them to become members of a community of individuals concerned both with art and with social justice, a community inspired and led in many ways by artists, writers, scholars, like the amazing cast we have here today. Thank you. I want to take a minute and thank all of our presenters today who are exceptional in what they do. The folks you're going to see here in a minute who came to be with us today and share their experiences, talents, and expertise are truly unique. They are unique human beings whose tireless efforts and unwavering commitment to creating a more just and equitable work through their art and through their art and scholarship are inspiring and make a real difference in the lives who need it the most. Your work and advocacy have not only touched the lives of those you directly impact, but it has inspired us all to get involved and to utilize our own gifts to make a difference in the world. Thank you. For this, we are truly grateful and we're deeply honored to have you here. We want to thank the students for sharing their art and their day with us. We thank our sponsors in this endeavor, you, our audiences, and the Romanian United Fund, an organization that works to make our communities better and stronger, and who matched your kind donations to make this symposium possible, as I said before. So thank you very much. The topic of our symposium is immigrant stories. Why immigrants? We live in some complicated times when, because of the resurgence of radicalized white power movements, we are forced to unpack, highlight, and explicate what it means to belong, so that all of us, regardless of our skin color, our ethnic and racial identities, our accents, can feel that our lives and stories matter. Immigrants are held hostage at the borders, believed to be a threat to an otherwise, quote unquote, great nation. They're suspected to infiltrate guns in a country that upholds the right to carry arms as constitutionally granted. They are suspected to infiltrate drugs, gangs, and terror in a country that surely has its own. They are confronting immigrant bans, especially if their country of origin is looked down upon by white nationalists and referred through vulgar comparisons and metaphors in nationalist public discourses. Particularly immigrants who are also people of color or practice a non-Christian faith are constantly prohibited from becoming fully American, as Wajahat Ali writes about in his last memoir. But Waj, as his friends call him, also explains that the only thing we have to resist these narratives of exclusion that have been happening since the beginning of this nation is hope. Quote, investing in hope means allowing yourself to be open to the possibility that life will improve and that change is just beyond the horizon. But it also means exposing yourself to the disappointment and crushed dreams. It means voluntarily making yourself vulnerable to pain. However, he continues, I refuse to embrace the alternative, which is cynicism and apathy. And so are we. Today, we are choosing to hear hope in the stories that you all share with us. So without further delay, I want to declare the symposium open, and I would like to introduce Archer's president, Mihaela Campion, to say a few words. Thank you.
Roxana, there are people, sorry to interrupt, there are people in the waiting room. If you could.
Okay, sorry, and thank you. Admit.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mihaela Campion, and I mean, really, I feel so touched that I don't feel like I can add anything else in addition to what Roxana said, except a big thank you to all of you who agreed to participate in this project. It's been on our vision for over a year. We worked really hard, volunteering with all of you to make it happen. And I would like primarily to say a big thank you to Roxana, who really made this event possible. I don't want to exclude anybody else, but I just wanted to say that Roxana was really the visionary and the producer of this event. And she really rocks. I mean, we have to give her the credit that she deserves. And in addition to her, to thank all of you, the students, the speakers, the volunteers, Ruth, and everybody else who is here with us today. And I hope you'll enjoy, write reviews on our page, YouTube. That's the only way we can grow and continue to make these kind of events possible.
Great, thank you so much, Mihaela. And without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, Domnica Rădulescu. I wanted to show and read to you this wonderful biography so that you get to know Domnica a little bit more, and I have a few links to share with you in chat. But, sorry. All righty. Domnica Rădulescu is an American writer of Romanian origin living in the United States, where she arrived in 1983 as a political refugee, having escaped the communist dictatorship of her native Romania. She settled in Chicago, where she obtained a master's degree in comparative literature and a PhD in Romance languages from the University of Chicago. She is the Edwin A. Morrison Professor of Comparative Literature at Washington and Lee University. Rădulescu is the author of 3 critically acclaimed novels, Train to Trieste, Black Sea Twilight, and Country of Red Azaleas, and of award-winning plays. Train to Trieste has been published in 13 languages and is the winner of the 2009 Library of Virginia Fiction Award. Rădulescu received the 2011 Outstanding Faculty Award from the State Council of Higher Education of Virginia, and is twice a Fulbright Scholar. She also published 14 nonfiction books, edited and co-edited collections on topics ranging from the tragic heroine in Western literature to feminist comedy, to studies of exile in literature, to theater of war and exile, refugee arts, and 2 collections of original plays. 2 of her plays, Exit is My Home and Town with Very Nice People, were runners-up for the Jane Chambers Playwriting Award in 2012 and 2013. Dream in a Suitcase, the story of an immigrant life, which I actually have right here on my desk. Ah, my background is prohibiting my showing it. Dominica, maybe you are more successful in showing it. It's her first memoir, and it has been released from Austin Macaulay Publishers in 2021. She's also the co-editor of Voices on the Move, an anthology by and about refugees, and of the forthcoming Immigrant Voices in the Context of the Pandemic. And I also want to share with you a few links in the chat to some texts that you can actually look at and purchase if you so will. We highly encourage you to do that deal with immigrant stories and immigrant life. And I'll stop here, and Dominica, please come off mute and let us hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, Roxana. So happy to see you all and so honored to be part of this wonderful and necessary event. And congratulations to all of you who have written stories. The young people, your generation is our hope that you're going to make the world better after we messed it up. And I am very excited to be here with Roxana and Mihaela and to see so many of my wonderful colleagues and collaborators from Romanian diaspora and otherwise, colleagues and friends from all the way back when I was a student at getting my BA at Loyola University in Chicago. I am in Lexington, Virginia, where I've been living for the last 30 years and teaching at Washington Lee University. I'm going to, yes, and I need to say that the collections that, co-edited collections that Roxana has just mentioned, she is one of the two co-editors. She suffers for terrible timidity and sort of unassuming, self-effacing. So Roxana and I are co-editors of Voices on the Move, the first volume and the second one, which is forthcoming this year. We just closed the contract. So without further ado, I'm going to now move on to my presentation, which is titled Storytelling as Survival, Departures, Arrivals, and All the In-Betweens. It is a hybridic piece, sort of something of a mosaic made of fragments from experience, from my various writings, and sort of put together, especially for this event, with my own commentaries on my commentaries. So it's sort of both there's a French put it, a mise en abîme, a place into the abyss of my own work, but also connecting with today's event. And first, I'm going to read several quotes that have informed this work, that have informed a lot of my work of creative writing, creative fiction, creative nonfiction, playwriting, and essay writing, and that have touched me and informed my living as well, my experience as an immigrant, as an artist, as an immigrant artist. First quote is, and then also I will share, I will place certain keywords as well and etymologies, words that will be used and that I will explore. The writer is a foreign country. Favorite French writer of mine, Marguerite Duras, said that, and she will be quoted again, and I will refer to her. In a foreign country, my family is like shattered glass. This was said by Aglaia Veterani, a dear compatriot writer of German expression, Romanian writer of German expression, no longer alive. And this is from her work titled Why the Child is Boiling in the Polenta. Strangely, or rather quite logically, it is at moments like this when I find myself between two languages that I believe I can see and feel more intensely than ever. Andrei Makin, French-Russian, Russian-French immigrant writer. Art is a lie that makes us realize truth, at least the truth that is given us to understand. Pablo Picasso. Exile is the unhealable rift between being and the native place, between the self and its true home. Its sadness can never be surmounted. Exile is tremendously secular and unbearably historical. It is produced by human beings for other human beings, and like death, but without death's ultimate mercy, it has torn millions of people from traditions, family, and geography. And now, important keywords that I will use in my presentation with their etymologies. I always like to search and to travel back into the history of words through etymologies, because it's very exciting for me also as a linguist and as a creative artist of the spoken and written word to see and to develop, to discover the evolution of words and therefore of meaning making. Immigrate, to pass into a place as a new inhabitant or resident, especially to move to a country where one is not a native, for the purpose of settling permanently, comes from the Latin immigratus, immigrare, to remove, go into, move in. Emigrant with an E, one who quits a country or region to settle in another, from Latin immigrantem, immigrants, to move away. Exile, in 1300s, Old French, exilier, exile, banish, expel, drive off, from Latin, of course, exilare, exilare, from Latin exilium, banishment, exile, place of exile. A refugee, one who flees to a refuge or shelter or place of safety, one who in times of persecution or political disorder flees to a foreign country for safety. Latin refugium, taking refuge, place to flee back to, fugere, to flee. And nostalgia, from Greek algos, pain, grief, distress, plus nostos, homecoming, from neomai, to reach some place, escape, return, get home. So basically nostalgia is grief for homecoming. Over the decades, my existence as an immigrant, refugee, exile has evolved, changed, has been transformed, and it has seeped into all aspects of my life and creative work. At times, I processed it through my writings as a continuously painful loss, a psychological amputation, I have called it at times. At other times, as a richness of being at home in many places and living within many cultures. And more often than not, as a combination of the two. At times, I perceived my exilic condition more as an uprooting, at other times as a rerouting, most of the times, again, as a little of both. It has been said that writers often keep writing the same story over and over again in different forms. I could say that about the relationship between my creative work and my existence as an immigrant, displaced person, uprooted, rerouted. At times, I have been soaked in nostalgia, a grieving longing for homecoming. At other times, I absolutely detested the notion of homecoming, meaning going back to where I left, because of the heavy baggage and the tenuous relation I have with my native country, with my adoptive one as well. But whatever weighed more in this back and forth sprints between here and there, between different homes, spaces, and states of existence, I have always written about it, and it has been my writing that has taught me how to navigate the tumultuous waters of my journey, that has helped me survive and hold on to a core of me that, despite all the uprootings, has remained intact, I believe so, and has become stronger with time, has grown with each and every retelling. I have been the Scheherazade of my own survival and of my own existence as immigrant, refugee, exile, displaced, uprooted individual. As you know, Scheherazade, night after night, story after story, she saves her life literally through storytelling. It has always been about the suitcase, what to take and what to leave behind, what to hold on to and what to let go of. In the summer of 1983, I packed up a modest collection of belongings, clothes for all weather, a handful of family photographs, a volume of poetry, a collection of short stories I had written in my native Romanian, and I said goodbye to my family, my country, and the 22 years young woman that I was. and boarded a one-way flight to Rome for the revolution of my life, with the intention of never returning as long as the dictatorship lasted. With the passing of years and acquisition of renewed understanding, the brokenness produced by that initial trauma of displacement has been channeled and transformed into new, real, and imaginary homes, into mosaics of experience and spaces of reinvention. Since my arrival as a political refugee in the American city of Chicago in the 1980s, during one of the coldest winters of the century, which I know one such a winter, a very cold one, is taking place right now, different variants of the question, where are you from, have been asked of me hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I know of most of you here on this, present here at this presentation. In the words of the writer and theoretician Sarah Ahmed, the question, where are you from, becomes something you reside in, and to be questionable can feel like a residence. Both through my writing and my life choices, I have become the architect of my own residence of foreignness. Like many other exiled writers across literary history, from Ovid to Dante to Nabokov to Joseph Brodsky, Salman Rushdie, Edwidge Dandicat, to name just a few, I have tried to build imaginary homelands and to be my own suitcase, as is clear in my newly published memoir, Dream in a Suitcase, the story of an immigrant life. And yes, here it is, you know, see it. In his book of poems, Tristia, written in exile on the territory of then Dacia, today's Romania, away from his beloved Rome, the poet Ovid says, "Behold me, deprived of native land, of you and my home, bereft of all that could be taken from me. My mind is nevertheless my comrade and my joy. Over this, Caesar could have no right." This fierce sense of freedom that the exiled artist experiences once left with nothing but their own mind and creativity is a bold and painful stretch across frontiers, an impulsive embracing of the unknown in a reckless but necessary desire to make the whole world one's own. As an artist of the written and spoken word who has chosen her adoptive country and the languages of her art with deliberation, I function and exist across communities of thought and imagination rather than within national and ethnic lines, which I have always found imprisoning and from which I escaped more than 35 years ago. As many of you know, I'm very non-patriotic of any country. I do not believe or uphold any patriotic sentiments for any country. In light of Virgil Nemoianu's theories of literature as a preservation of defeat, a relaxed imperfection, again, he says that literature is a preservation of defeat, a relaxed imperfection, and paradoxically as a force of renewal, I pursue the transformation of the experience of exile and displacement, largely through its manifestations in literary creations, in narrative, creative fiction, and nonfiction and theater. In this exploration, I'm interested in the ways in which the imperfection of exile meets the relaxed imperfection and smiling defeat that is literature, thus creating a glorious form of imperfection that is envisioning possibilities and nursing dreams. I want to make a little parenthesis here and say that the whole notion of imperfection here is also drawn from a project I participated in and I'm still part of several years ago, and now a book has come out of that titled Sublime Imperfection, Studies in Mistakes and Errors. While exile is a loss, and a profound one at that, it is also a form of rebirth. And in the cases of political exile, an extreme measure of finding freedom from oppression, war, genocide. Equally, while literature is considered secondary to history and social sciences with regards to factual truth and historical facts, It is also, in Nemoyano's words, a force of renewal, precisely because, as he says, it partakes of irrationality, randomness and surprise, rejection and dispersion, namely of what is most authentically representative of the organized chaos that is our human journey on Earth. In between my nomadic lives, several picaresque heroines came to life in my novels and plays, as I find myself in perpetual revolutions between critical inquiries, dramatic embodiments, and imagined lives, in a never-ending pool between different countries and cultures, languages, between belonging and rootlessness. As someone who has lived at crossroads and comes from a country of crossroads, who has opted to throw herself into the larger unknown crossroads of the world, I have created heroines who chose to live at crossroads precisely as spaces of belonging and freedom. This is what one of my heroines, Mona Manoliu, from my novel Train to Trieste, says towards the end of the book in a chapter titled Indiana, Crossroads of America. I have chosen to live in the flattest, most boring landscape of the American Midwest. I love the flat, wide, endless cornfields where the sun rises and sets with a vengeance every day, having no mountains, no valleys, no undulating earth to hide behind. This space soothes my heart. I have the illusion in its straight immensity that my native land is just over the horizon. Just beyond the stretch of cornfield is the backyard of my aunt and uncle's house in the Carpathians. As a writer, scholar, artist, teacher who lives in, creates in, and teaches in languages other than her own native language, one must be, in the words of Hélène Cixous, a thief of language, or in the French innuendo, une voleuse de langue, which means both to fly with language and to steal language. Cixous urges female artists to be thieves of language and thus make up for the fact that they have been excluded from language and relegated to the realm of silence. Thus, I am doubly a thief of language, of several languages, as I tell my stories and as my heroines tell their stories in languages other than their native ones. In my novel, Train to Trieste, my heroine Mona confesses that sometimes I want to steal everybody else's country and miss it, having to give up, forsake, relinquish our own first familiar native cities, landscapes, and stories forever. We have to appropriate and make our own adoptive or adopted cities, landscapes, languages. My heroine is doing her damnness to spill her past, her memories, her language onto her American Chicago environment. She brings it all together though, her past and her present, her memories and her living moment, her languages, cultures, spaces, into a carefully sewn, colorful quilt. Slowly in the Chicago cold, I learn how to live within freedom. I make a little place for myself within its wild vastness. And there is me, the little piece of me in the mosaic of America. Do you see me there? I'm the one with a maroon downcoat from a secondhand store and gray boots that are too tight for my frostbitten feet. I'm right there standing on State Street between the Russian woman selling apples and bananas and the Mexican man with a hot dog stand. Do you see me now? In an essay titled How I Lost My Memory and Never Got It Back, I say, I lost my memory that fateful September 5th of 1983 in old Bucharest that was glowing in the late summer light. The Roma girl at the street corner was selling orange chrysanthemums and pale roses. I wanted to lose my memory, drop it off the plane that took off towards Fiumicino Airport in Rome, Italy, sealing my fate as a refugee, exile, emigre, vagabond, nomad, homeless, uprooted citizen of the world. I saw my memory fall and pulverize into millions of pieces above the neatly cut squares of Romanian agriculture, rye, wheat, corn, sunflowers, until all of me and my memory of me flew in all directions and settled onto the rye and sunflowers and potato cultures like the ashes from a recently incinerated corpse. I have rewritten this departure and many departures, as well as many arrivals and returns that could have been mine, that were or could have been those of many others who left, resettled, or returned in the most diverse and often most inconceivable circumstances. Rewriting it and reinventing it, whether similar to my own experience or not at all, has always been a fulfilling and effective strategy of survival and liberation. As I also believe that telling stories of uprooting and rerouting invites us to imagine and recreate new worlds, better, more just, more inclusive. In my recent memoir, the heroine imagines myriad departures exasperated by the constant question of whether hers is a true story. She says, I crawled under barbed wire across the Romanian border towards freedom. I floated inside an inner tube across the Danube River. I escaped hidden in a vegetable box in the back of a truck driving to Yugoslavia, smelling of onions and rhubarb. And I gave myself in to the customs police upon my arrival out of the veggie box. They were all true stories of ways in which some of my compatriots had left Romania during this dark, hungry, scary 80s, but they were not mine. Had I hitchhiked from Belgrade to Trieste like my heroine? Had I left by train, by boat? What? No, none of that. I had left on a plane with a tourist visa to Rome. My heroines, though, had been a lot more adventurous than me. But theirs and mine were all true stories. Recently, as I have noted, and as Roxana generously noted as well, I have published my memoir, Dream in a Suitcase, The Story of an Immigrant Life, and this passage was quoted from it. Like Marguerite Duras, however, I believe that autobiography is an impossibility. She said, the story of your life, of my life, they do not exist. The novel of my life, of our lives, yes, but not history. It is in the recovery of time by the imaginary that the breath of life is returned to life. In my lifelong journey as a refugee, immigrant, nomad, on this imperfect yet still beautiful planet of ours, and as a thief of language, it has indeed been the recovery of time by the imaginary that has been my most secure and exhilarating space of belonging. In her book, Create Dangerously, The Immigrant Artist at Work, Edwidge Dandicat ponders whether there is such a thing as an immigrant reader. She concludes, together with Roland Barthes, that the destination of a text is at least as important as its origins, and that the writer, bound to the reader under a diabolic, even joyful circumstance, can possibly become an honorary citizen of the country of his readers. It is in such a location of openness towards worldwide citizenry, or in the words of the African-American theorist Bell Hooks, from a place of margins as a space of radical openness, that I construct my residence of foreignness and unravel my dream in a suitcase. In writing our immigrant stories, we also escape what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has called in a TED Talk, the danger of the single story, the one that pushes us into the dead end of stereotypes and preconceived notions of what a refugee is, an immigrant, what an immigrant might be, into the pitfall of intolerance and judgment inscribed precisely in that nagging, relentless question of, where are you from? I like your accent, such a cute accent you have. Often, my heroines take me to the darkest places of history and illustrate extraordinary capacities of survival and resistance in a violent world, one that too often is hostile to women and their power. Such are my heroines, Lina and Mina, the heroines of my play, Exile is My Home, a sci-fi immigrant fairy tale, inspired by the realities of immigration and the genocidal wars that cause it. Mina says, I was born in exile. Where were you born? I was born on the way to the market. Oh, that makes sense then. That's why we get along. Why we sort of get along. In any case, it's better than with the others who were born somewhere precise. Good for us that we were born in the air. Nowhere, out there, in the air. If it wasn't so damn inconvenient to spend one's life on the road, I would say living in constant exile is the best home there is. In the absence of stable homes and in the exhausting searches for homes of belonging, the truth-telling story itself is the only reliable form of belonging. perhaps precisely because of its fluid borders and hyphenated identities. Literature, in its stubborn preservation of defeat and relaxed imperfection, draws from the brokenness caused by exile and political trauma in fractured forms and irreverent ironies that illuminate the human truthfulness of such experience with much more poignancy than most statistics, history books, and verbose lectures about social inequality. I embrace Jean-François Lyotard's skepticism of meta-narratives and his theorized reliance on small narratives, singular events, local personal stories, petits récits, that are grounded in specific and diverse human experiences rather than in any unifying discourse. Maybe exile is the fundamental illustration of the postmodern condition, as it jolts one out of all certainty about the stability of truth and breaks any illusion of an immutable spatial, moral, or cultural reality. So, if in Marguerite Duras' words, the writer is a foreign country, and the foreign exile artist carries their country in their story, in their literal or metaphoric suitcase, this double foreignness may just be a home of radical openness. Home is in the story, survival is in the story. At least so thought the young woman on the September morning when she left her country with a volume of stories in her suitcase, running for her life and getting on that plane to Rome, Italy for the adventure of her life. And I will close with a paragraph from my memoir that tells of an exilic epiphany in which the heroine merges her past self with her present self as she is remembering a magical moonlit winter snowy night in the Shenandoah Valley in the Appalachians with her then small children. A demented moon casts a white strip of light on the snowy hill. The smell of snow and wood-burning stoves in the vicinity, the moon flooding earth, the swooshing of the sleds through the cold wind, the yelps and laughs of the children conjure up a memory of your own childhood a century ago and on another planet, in Brasov, when you did the same. Your husband looks at the three of you amused and loving as you're gliding past him on the small sleds you bought at Kmart. Maybe this time you got all the pieces together and it's going to work. You confidently take refuge in the cliche American expressions like, you're going to make it work, you will make it, as if you're talking about a factory machine that became dysfunctional and that's going to be repaired and be all right. Somewhere in the combination of moonlight, solid cold, iridescent snow, the smell of wood-burning stoves and children unhinged shouts, you find a place in yourself that is luminous, solid, and unbroken. The place from where you love and imagine. And in that very place of light and imagination, the memory of you sledding as a child in the Carpathians marries this full to the brim moment of you sledding with your own children in the Appalachians. It cleaves the past you with the present you in a seamless, grounded, glowing piece of you. All of you is right here, right now, under the full winter moon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much, Dominika. That was wonderful. And I just wanted to open the floor for questions from the audience, please. We're going to try to keep an eye on Facebook Live as well. But please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask the question, or if you want to type it in the chat. I see Catherine has a hand up.
Hi, thank you. I'm kind of sick, so I don't want to put my camera on. I look horrible. But I wanted to say, because I met Dominika in the mid-'80s, that I'm very grateful that she is herself, because that's one of the biggest forms of rebellion, when you're put in the situation of not having a home, but because you left your old home and trying to build a new life. I know for her and her parents, that was very difficult because of many social aspects. And even sometimes when people think, I say in quote, are helping refugees, does that mean you have to go to their church? Does this mean you can be yourself? That it was a wonderful talk. And I think that, because you held on to your dreams, you've been able to attain, the life that you want.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. And very interesting, the way the threads of life sort of turn in the circle. Things come back circularly, because recently, after more than 30 years, Kate and I actually reconnected and remembered our times. And she reminded me a lot of our times at Loyola and in Chicago, which I had forgotten, because one thing, sorry, Kate, but it is something that has happened to me. I don't know if it happens to many of you others who are immigrants, that I've been experiencing these blocks of memory black holes, sort of. So writing for me is also, I guess it's an effect of trauma, of post-traumatic stress, forgetfulness. So writing for me has been also another way of remembering and of reacquiring the memories that I might have lost. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have a couple of points, Dominika, if that's okay. And while people are thinking of more questions, I really love the expression of thief of language, right? Or somebody who flies with languages, if you will. I don't know if I'm translating that correctly from the French, but I wanted to say that, as a writer, Dominika uses English, French, Spanish, Romanian, even Farsi and Arabic in her writing. I think I remember some characters, maybe not, maybe I'm misremembering, but all these languages, right? Tell us a little bit more about the creative process. What does it mean to use a different language in one's writing? What are you thinking about in terms of audiences? What are you thinking about in terms of switching back and forth? Talk a little bit more about this voice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I think I have been a thief of language my whole life. When I discovered Hélène Cixous's essay, The Laugh of the Medusa, Le Rire de la Méduse, which is an essay that has had a very transformative effect on my life and that I teach often to my students. I felt like, wow, she's saying exactly how I feel. Also, I don't know how often, most likely many of you here have experienced someone telling you, an American-born person telling you, oh, your English is so good, and you speak English so well. And throughout my life, particularly as I've been publishing books in English and as I have deliberately chosen to write as the main language of my writing, both academic works and creative fiction, English, I find it somewhat offensive. Why not say it? It gets on my nerves more and more. So
it is a microaggression.
It is a microaggression, yeah. And even worse, when you have, for instance, African-American or African people for French citizens in France, for instance, and they're being asked, where are you from? Or you speak French so well, when they come from Francophone countries. But to me, crossing languages and assuming and stealing and writing in a second language, in another language than my own native language, is a great adventure, and is also a great sense of freedom. Writers have forever written in other languages than their own. In the beginning of early modern periods, writers were writing in Latin or in other languages that were not their first spoken languages. And to me, it is really a journey and an adventure entering the spaces that we inhabit with each language, because we inhabit languages, we live, love, die, hate, exist in languages. And it is an extraordinary journey for me. I am now in the process of writing my sixth novel in French, and it's called Tu viens du pays des vampires, you come from the country of vampires. And because I have recently spent more and more time in France, you know that I've taught French and French literature for many decades. And it is another country and culture and language within which I feel very much at home. It is one of my homes. So it is exhilarating to be experiencing now. I've written academically, scholarly work in French, but now to rediscover that other self. It is also a rediscovering and a forging of new selves, of new creative selves. And it's just wonderful to see oneself multiplied in these different universes.
How about maybe to piggyback on what you said, what does the concept of mother tongue mean to you?
I mean, yeah, I like it. Mother tongue. It has this. In French also, it is called langue maternelle, maternal language. Romanian limba materna. In English, we call it native. I don't know. It's a fluid concept. I have written very little in Romanian, and when I mean, it's obviously the first language, the language that we first uttered, but that is also relative, because, for instance, my children were brought up entirely bilingual, so they could truly say that even though they're Americans, they were born here, and their mastery of English, yes, it's better than Romanian, but they have also a very intuitive, instinctive mastery of Romanian, because they grew up speaking both. So for them, truly, literally, since they learned it from me, and since I was mostly a single mother, maternal language, Romanian, is their maternal language. And so to speak, maybe my other maternal language is French, because I grew up speaking Romanian and French and learned French from my mother, and who was also a French teacher. So I could say that is also my maternal language. So it's a fluid concept. I don't like to, you know, I like hybridity and fluidity, and to navigate through this linguistic and cultural territories.
Great, thank you so much. We have a question in the chat from Isabel. Would you like to ask it yourself, Isabel, or would you like me to ask it?
Sure, I can ask
Thank
it
you.
here. Yeah. So I really loved how you used all of the different titles in your writing of refugee, immigrant, nomad, because I feel very similarly there. And there's always the outside critique as an artist or author of, well, you have to choose one, you know, thing to narrow down your marketing. And I'm like, no, it is, we are the multitudes of all these things all at once. And so I'm curious how your publishing journey has been, because I think for me, when I hear your writing, you're really making the personal very universal, like you said, sledding in Carpathia mountains and then going down, thinking of the Appalachian sledding memories. And I always hear this, you know, back as narrow your audience, and I really feel your audience is the diaspora. But I'm curious if there are any audience people that you think of when you are writing, or is it more of the personal practice and then you revise or edit as you go along, as you've published so many books?
Yeah, well, there are two different things, the writing and the publishing. And the writing, you know, it's almost, to me, it's an existential need, and it's something almost sacred. It's not just what I do, but it's very profoundly who I am. I left my country in order to be able to fulfill myself as a creative writer. And then there is a publishing, which is bringing out the book, and which involves the various levels and layers of consumerism of the publishing industry, which is a different thing. So I always prefer to call myself a writer than an author, because a writer is the aspect of the creation, of the creativity, whereas author immediately involves the element of the publishing industry. And my experiences have varied, because I published with the big trade publishers such as Knopf, Doubleday, Hachette, as well as with small independent presses of the variety of them, and as well as academic presses. And every time the experiences are different, and some are better than others. I have to say that when my first novel was purchased by Knopf, Train to Trieste was purchased by Knopf, and I had a mostly pleasant experience with my editor. However, there were always there was good and bad. For one thing, she thought that what was very specific and attractive about my writing was the voice. She said, you either, of style you can edit, but voice you either have it or you don't, and you definitely have a very strong narrative voice. But it was not always a smooth journey, in the sense that, yes, I write poetically, lyrically, and we sometimes did get into somewhat tenuous, tense relations, tense experiences, because she was sort of trying to forge me into a direction that did not feel particularly authentic, but that was constantly moving me towards this reader, the reader with capital R. And I mentioned that in my memoir, Dream in a Suitcase. The reader, I don't know who this reader is, but I don't write for them. This big capital reader that was always mentioned. Well, the reader is confused here. Well, you have to make this clear for the reader. And I was like, no, I don't. The reader needs to work a little bit on their own. So yes, clarity is important, but also I'm writing literature, and there is symbolism, there is metaphor, there is, the creation of new worlds. So it's a complicated, tenuous journey, sometimes exciting, sometimes at times discouraging. But yes, I have had, I don't know if I'm just rambling and I'm answering at all.
No, you are. It's good to hear, right? Even though we've established ourselves as writers or artists, that this pushback is constantly there, or like you said, they're trying to forge me into this type of artist for this particular.
Yes, it's always like, try to make it clear, always the attempt to spoon feed the reader. And
yes,
with spoon feed, I don't write with the spoon feeding the reader. I think I don't write with an audience in mind, and I write because I need to write. I write for the world, as I said in my, this world citizenry of readers. Whoever wants to approach my worlds is welcome. And really, for posterity, as someone who's so passionately and irrevocably committed to being an artist of the written and spoken word, I write for myself in the world. And yes, I honor my audiences, but I don't write with a particular audience in mind. And yes, sometimes the publishing industry tends to box you in, and to make you into something that you might not want to be, to please some kind of an imaginary, idealized reader that I frankly don't care about.
Thank you. It just affirmed many of my own experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you both. We have people also on Facebook Live. Juana Zaik mentions the power of storytelling that she really appreciated in what you talked about, Dominika. And I had a thought as you were presenting, and I was taking notes about this idea of losing memory, wanting to forget almost. Can you talk a little bit more about this idea in the context of immigration?
Yeah, I think I wanted to lose it so much that I did a very good job and lost a lot of it quite a lot of it. Literally, I do have blocks of black holes that are.
I do too. Absolutely.
Yeah, and often, I don't know if that happens to you, when I go back to Romania and my family says, do you remember when you're little and you did that? Or do you remember that when we went there? And I'm looking at them and I'm worried to not offend them, but no, I don't remember. But writing has its miracles. And I often actually, I couldn't finish Train to Trieste until I went back and I wrote the ending. The ending appeared to me in some kind of epiphany. I love epiphanies, and I sort of write in my chapters in small epiphanies, but I had this revelation epiphany of how the ending should be, because I connected with something very deep, very visceral in my past, and in the landscape, in the sounds, in the smells, in the light, in the sights, and that brought back floods, rushes of memory. So I think oblivion is at times merciful, but and also memory is can be is painful. So it's I suppose that forgetfulness, it's one way of I write a lot about that. In fact, in my new novel that I'm writing in French, it's all written in the second person and through the veil of amnesia, because my character, my heroine, suffered a terrible traumatic shock, and she is suffering from dissociative amnesia. And once in a while, like if I know you might have read my Black Sea Twilight, there was an entire chapter where my character Nora suffers from amnesia. So it's been a little bit of an artistic obsession of mine, and existential as well, because and then times from my first years in America that I blocked out, that I forgot. So writing is remembering, as memory searching, but also memory is a very unreliable vehicle of experience. This is why I say I believe, like Marguerite Duras, that autobiography is an impossibility. As soon as you write your story, you're fictionalizing, because you're writing the memory of your story, the memory of your life. You're not writing your life. And of course, there is beauty in that. We all fictionalize ourselves, but then fiction is a lie through which we tell the truth.
Yeah, that's great. We have a hand up from iPhone 2 here on Zoom. Hello, I don't know, I cannot see your name. Somebody connected through an iPhone. Number 2 on the Zoom comment. People with a hand up, the hand went down. All right, so if you can think of your question, I kindly ask you to type it in chat. We will see it there and we'll get you an answer. But thank you so much, Dominika. This has been extremely wonderful. And let us keep on going. Let me please share my screen once again to introduce our next speaker. There we go, today. And our next speaker is a musician. We have Anna Everling. And let me introduce Anna to you. Anna Everling is a singer that creates vocal music inspired from Romanian folklore, classical music, as well as improvised music. Possessing a brilliant and hypnotic voice, Anna brings traditional Eastern European music and storytelling into the contemporary idiom, delivering complex performances that address universal themes. Blessed with a potent crystalline voice and a striking stage presence, Everling delivers her unusual fusion with the utmost delicacy and elegance, is a quote from the Chicago reader Catalina Maria Johnson. Anna performs often with several groups of her own. Everling Onderdonk duo, I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced it correctly, with David Onderdonk, which led to the release of the multimedia project, The Music of Winga and Taraf de Chicago, an ensemble. I'm not sure who is able to draw lines on my presentation, but I wanted to present Travte Chicago, ensemble of Chicago-based musicians playing music from Moldova and Bessarabia area. And let me drop in chat the link to Anna's everything to her oh my goodness, what is happening here? Here we go, to her website, so you can learn more. There we go. We can learn more about Anna and listen to some snippets of her music and purchase her music. But without further ado, I would like to invite Anna to unmute herself. And I'm going to stop the share of my screen so we can see her and listen to her today. Thank you. And I also wanted to make you, there we go, spotlight Anna. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mihaela, Roxana, for having me. Can you hear me?
I loved that song.
So I come from Republic of Moldova, and this is a song written by Zlata Tkac from the Soviet Moldova, and it's called Puișorii, the Baby Birds. Lyrics written by Grigore Vieru. And it's a children's song. A song that we have in our ABC book called Albinuța, when we learn how to read. And the baby birds are being asked, how do you stay warm without little covers in your nest? Well, we cover ourselves with our mama's warm feathers. What if your mama is away and the rain starts falling? We cover ourselves then with the leaf from our maternal tree. What if mama doesn't come and the leaf falls? How can mama not come? How can the leaf fall?
lași cum stați în cuib voi fără plăpumioare. Ne învelim cu ale mamei calde aripioare. Ne învelim cu ale mamei calde aripioare. Dacă mama nu-i acasă și ploița cerne, ne învelim atunci cu frunza ramurii materne. Ne învelim atunci cu frunza ramurii materne. Dacă nu o să vină mama și o să cadă frunza, cum nu o să vină mama, cum să cadă frunza, cum nu o să vină mama, cum să cadă frunza. Voi golași cum stați în cuib voi fără plăpumioare. Ne învelim cu ale mamei calde aripioare. Ne învelim cu ale mamei calde aripioare. Dacă mama nu-i acasă și ploița cerne, ne învelim atunci cu frunza ramurii materne. Ne învelim atunci cu frunza ramurii materne. Dacă nu o să vină mama și o să cadă frunza, cum nu o să vină mama, cum să cadă frunza, cum nu o să vină mama, cum să cadă frunza. You can hear me, right? Still? Okay.
Woohoo! Yes, this was amazing.
Bravo, bravo, that was so good.
I have one more, but you let me know if you have time for that.
Absolutely, thank you.
A little word.
Amazing, amazing, amazing.
Thank you. One of my favorite composers, Romanian, Richard Oșanitsky, who did a lot for the Romanian jazz in the 70s. He's a complete jazz musician, doing big bands and bossa nova and free jazz. Amazing career that ended very early. This is a little word, un mic cuvânt. A little word and the seeds connect. A little word whispered an entire life that says what's been lost. Singing by memory about past lovers. Year after year has passed, but everything is in vain. You forgot about me. You don't want to remember anymore. You don't want to deal with longing and past love. I think I added it was very appropriate for the forgetting, for the forgetting theme of that Dominica mentioned. Un mic cuvânt și singurii se leagă. Un mic cuvânt șoptit o viață întreagă. Un mic cuvânt
ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântând pe de rost iubiri ce-au mai fost. Un mic cuvânt ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântându-te pe de rost. Un mic cuvânt și sângurii se leagă, un mic cuvânt șoptit o viață întreagă, un mic cuvânt ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântând pe de rost iubiri ce-a mai fost. Un mic cuvânt ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântându-te pe de rost. A trecut an după an, dar totul e în van. Tu nu mai știi de mine, nu mai vrei să-ți amintești povești de vis și de dor. Un mic cuvânt și sângurii se leagă, un mic cuvânt șoptit o viață întreagă, un mic cuvânt ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântând pe de rost iubiri ce-a mai fost. Un mic cuvânt ce spune parcă ce n-a mai fost, cântându-te pe de rost. Pe de rost.
This was amazing. Thank you so much. The comments are, the chat is flooded with, this is amazing. I'm getting the chills, both on Facebook Live and here on Zoom. Thank you so much, Anna. And I want to open this up to our audience members to ask any kind of questions. Somebody on Facebook Live was thankful for your marriage of bossa nova in Romanian. Chichi has a question. Would you like to unmute yourself, please, from the Zoom and ask it?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So I was just saying that I was interested in the spoken words you had in your second song about mothers. Was this part of this music? Was this part of the music or the song itself, or was it just like your inspiration for what inspired you to like write it?
Anna, I think you're muted. I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
Someone muted me. Maybe I muted myself. The music was written by Zlata Tkac.
I just wanted to ask if you're not speaking to please remain muted so we can hear the speaker on the screen. I thank you very much for that. Anna, the floor is yours.
Yes, lyrics. The poem is from the ABC book, right? Written by Grigore Vieru. He wrote for children a lot. And the music is written by Zlata Tkac, our first acclaimed national composer woman. and I love her music a lot, and it's very challenging, very interesting, dissonant, breaking rules. She's also one of those absolute genius that some of musicians here in Chicago that I work with the best musicians in town, they are like, wow, what amazing compositional work. So yeah, Zlata Tkach.
Thank you so much. And you guys were talking about bossa nova, that inspiration. I noticed in your third song, which I really love, that it sounded familiar to me. Well, no, like the chords sounded familiar to me. So how did that inspiration affect, or how did that inspiration affect you choosing to perform?
It reminded you of Girl from Ipanema, probably, right? Because it also modulates like that, exactly. And bossa nova is a big love of mine. My husband is Brazilian, and he introduced me to a lot of great Brazilian music. But singing in Romanian is I love that very, very much. It's very personal. It's I can't really help it. I can't even say that I love it. It doesn't matter. I can't help it. I want to sing in Romanian. So discovering Richard Dojanitsky was it was also like an epiphany. Like, oh wow, it's music that I love with a personal, national and motherland touch.
Thank you so much. Anybody else?
I was not expecting questions.
So, thank you so much for entertaining. Dominica with a raised hand.
Yes, hi, so beautiful and so creative and subtle and passionate at the same time. And yeah, I'm always humbled by musicians. I think music is the ultimate art form because it crosses all languages. And it is such a powerful trigger precisely for memory. I'm sure those of you who are here and who, you know, you listen, you hear a song, right, and it's immediately that you love. It's so easily a trigger to a past experience, right? I have a variety of songs that, you know, you listen to them and you're transported there. So I'm wondering, Anna, I don't want to make any presumptions, you know, about where you're born. You said you're from Republic of Moldova, but how long you've been in the States, or how long have you been away from your native country, or what your relationship is with that? So I'm not making any assumptions, but I'm wondering how fortunate you are to be such a gifted musician. Do you feel like you're constantly in touch with that through your art, through your music? In a way, you're crossing barriers and you are accessing past experiences and memory continuously through your music? I don't know if my question makes sense, but I know that I access memory through hearing music, but you are so fortunate also that you're able to produce it, create it, and embody it. So what is your relationship between music and...
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
I think we have kids here in the audience.
Yeah.
I don't know if my question made sense. If you...
Yes, I've been here for 13 years now in Chicago. I was born in Chisinau. I was a city kid. My parents are actors, and I wanted, soon after I immigrated, obviously it was a very it was just survival. There was no art or not even thinking about music. There was no time. But I wanted to be in the music business so bad that I would just sing anything with anybody, anywhere, anytime. I would sing in the streets. I would sing for food. It was a long way till I got here, and I think 4 years ago I started this memory, going down the memory lane, keeping some of my variety from the past. And it was always a question of, should I narrow my audience or not? What Isabel mentioned too. And it was good that I listened to you today. Somebody else is having the same questions as me. But yeah, it's memory. I'm remembering the music that I sing in choir that touched me. I could never forget it for some reason. It's because the way it made me feel. There were a lot of problems at home, but the choir was great. It made me feel profoundly. It made me feel like I'm doing something great. I'm doing, it's just something that many voices come into one. And our music from our country, Basarabia, is very sweet. And there's a word in Romanian, duios. It's very duios. And it's very much about the mother and the land and the beauty and how there's a bread. Here's the bread and it's delicious. And you know, it's like the Jesus that gave bread and fish and love. This is very much, it's like naive art. I compare it to naive art a lot. But it's not just naive, it's also very profound in its naiveness. So yeah, a lot of my activities now, I draw from my past, from my childhood, from what I used to be into, or my parents were into, what they were listening and reading. So I'm trying to recreate that world for myself now in my conscious adult life.
Thank you. That was amazing. Let's see if anybody else has a question. I see Isabel with a question in the chat. Would you like to ask it, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm glad, Anna, you also resonated with my question earlier because yes. I was curious about your collaboration process because you've mentioned you've worked with different artists around Chicago, but also from the initial idea, like going down memory lane to finding the notes to then a performance and finding the right collaborators. And then also your creative process, if it's kind of more, I know some artists are more spontaneous, others, they go to the studio every day and they're very rigorous. So I'm curious about how that process looks like for you.
Going to the studio every day is a thing of the past. Nobody does that anymore. Music industry changed a lot and it's changing really fast. But my collaboration process is, especially now that I'm singing more music from my country and the Eastern European kind of expression, they take it, the musicians take it, and interpret it in their own way, bring what they have to bring into it. Ask me if I'm okay with that, of course. Ultimately, it's my decision if I want to listen to their opinions or not. But I work with people that I like a lot, that are better than me, preferably, so that I can learn. I am blessed because I have some music education, and I can write a chart or a score or a basic thing for them, and then they can develop it into a bigger arrangement. So this is my collaboration process in a very short, in one phrase. But Taraf de Chicago is a great example where I gathered musicians from here that play our music, our traditional music. And they elevate it and bring some new blood into it, and it lives, it keeps living. And we bring it from the museum, from the shelves, and dust it and bring it back, and bring it on stages here, which is very cool.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely a treat. Please, everybody, do not forget to check out annaeverling.com. It's Anna's website. See the music, buy the music, listen to the music. Please support both Dominika and Anna and all those who are gonna be here on the screen in a minute. Thank you so much. We're gonna take a 5-minute break, y'all. So I'm gonna mute everybody and then we will return. It is 12:39 on my screen, so we will return in 5 minutes. I appreciate you. I'll see you back in a minute. Thank you. All right, everybody. Hopefully everybody got a chance to stretch a little bit, go grab a glass of water or a cup of coffee. But we are coming back on Zoom and in our live feed on Facebook. We've got more surprises in store. We've been delighted so far. Dominika and Anna were absolutely wonderful. And I am ready to share my screen once again and introduce our next speaker, who is Walid Mahdi, Dr. Walid Mahdi. Let me present to you a short bio. And keep an eye on the Zoom at the same time. There we go. So Walid Mahdi is an associate professor at the University of Oklahoma. He conducts research at the intersection of area studies and ethnic studies as he explores issues of cultural representation and identity politics in American, Arab, and Arab American contexts. Walid is a recipient of several national and international awards, and his peer-reviewed work appears in top-tier venues, including American Quarterly, Journal of American Ethnic History, and Journal of Cinema and Media Studies. Walid's current book project, From Drones to Travel Bans, Yemeni and Yemeni American Visual Narratives of Resistance, offers a multifaceted analysis of the US violations of Yemeni lives and lands in the name of security, and the aesthetics of Yemeni and Yemeni American visual artists' responses. His recent book, Arab Americans in Film, From Hollywood and Egyptian Stereotypes to Self-Representation, examines how Arab American belonging is constructed, defined, and redefined across Hollywood, Egyptian, and Arab American cinemas. He also guest edited 2 special issues and completed a multi-institutional research collaboration with Columbia University and the University of Jordan and the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies about the 2011 Arab Revolutionary Public Spheres. Walid has recently been elected as president of the Arab American Studies Association, an organization I highly encourage you to follow, for a 2-year term starting in November 2023. The AASA is a premier association of scholars and other persons interested in the study of Arab American history, ethnicity, culture, literature, art, music, politics, religion, sociology, and all other aspects of the Arab American experience. And as Walid starts talking, I will drop in both the Zoom chat and on Facebook Live a link to Walid's website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Roxana, for this generous introduction. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roxana and Mihaela, for the invitation. So far as the experience with the symposium has been incredible. I enjoyed very much listening to Dominika and Anna's performances and speeches, of course. It's been nurturing, it's all nurturing, you know, that's how I personally describe it. I come at this from a slightly different perspective. I'm not Romanian or having a Romanian background, but I identify myself as an immigrant. And I'd like to highlight 3 personal stories that somehow could touch on parts of what has been said so far. And I hope also maybe add to the conversation really of the theme of the symposium surrounding telling our immigration stories. The first story will be about my personal migration to the US, and the second and third stories will relate to personal stories that have informed or inspired my book writing process. You know, I'll be talking about one of my the recent book project that I published, and at the end I'll touch briefly on the book project that I'm working on at the moment. For me, it all started back in the 90s, mid-90s, I would say, when I was a high schooler. And I got introduced to a very interesting book called The Clash of Civilization. I don't know if any one of you have heard of that, but it's a book basically by a Harvard political scientist that goes by the name of Samuel Huntington. And I read the book in Arabic, not in English, because I didn't know English at that time in high school. But the book was very interesting to me because it presented a very problematic, I would say, to say the least, really, theory that imagined post-Cold War global system as one of clashing civilizations that essentially and certainly has fed very much the post 9/11 rise of neoconservatism in the United States, but for the most part really has fed the rise of the ultra-right movements, you know, across the globe, I would say. For me, it was exciting to know that there is such a line of thinking as a high schooler, and I was very much intrigued by it. You know, I didn't know much and anything about the West. Much of what I went through the public school system was very much in relation to my history, my tradition. I did some histories on geography and history and literature, but I haven't really. I was not quite aware of the complexities of West-East, you know, relations. If you think about it, I certainly didn't accept the premise of what was proposed in the book, and because it was essentially saying that we're all doomed, you know, we're all doomed to clash as a globe, and in part will be clashing because we're somehow neatly rallying around a certain or given, you know, sense of identity that we rally around. There's an Islamic civilization, there's a Western civilization, and he goes about and create 7 or 8 civilizations and prophesizes that there will be somehow some kind of a doom, I would say. Fast forward, I decided to do English language and literature in my undergraduate education, and I was still in Yemen. It's a country in the Arabian Peninsula, neighboring a very wealthy oil-producing nations, Saudi Arabia, Emirates. You probably have heard of Qatar in relation to the World Cup. No matter what's the policy around that. Anyway, it's a neighbor to those countries. And I did English literature in Yemen, in Taiz University. That's the city I was part of. And at some point I finished my bachelor's degree, and I taught there also for 2 years. And I applied for Fulbright, and I got it. You know, that allowed me, it was a grant by the Department of State, basically, that allowed me to come enabled me to come to the United States. I initially went to New Mexico, the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, where I did my master's degree in cultural studies and comparative literature. And then at some point, I got a support from the MacArthur Foundation to, you know, move me to University of Minnesota, where I did my PhD in American Studies. That's where I learned a lot about American history, the complexity of what it means to be American, and the whole entire studies of migration studies in general. I developed fascination, especially in when it comes to U.S. System, minority majority politics, the cultural formations around that, and also developed interest in U.S. Middle East specifically, and U.S. Arab even more specifically, kind of cultural history, if you like. At some point, I got a job offer for a 1 year in George Mason University in Virginia before I landed my tenure track job at the University of Oklahoma, where I am right now. And I'm basically neighbor to Roxana. We live a few miles apart from each other. So I'm right now in the Department of International Area Studies, and that's where I'm based. I would say my journey overall has been one of privilege in a way, because I haven't necessarily, my travel was very much supported. I haven't encountered any like challenges that made it harder for me to accomplish what I've done. But much of what my struggle were really boiled down to my own experiences in relation to my identity, you know, as an immigrant, as a first generation, PhD student, as as someone who comes from a country that is somehow the country of Yemen itself is going through a lot of wars, and much of what's happening in Yemen is the tragedy of Yemen still unfolds in some ways, and the United States has taken part in much of the destruction of that country. So as I developed my understanding what it means to be a Yemeni American, the background of that has been always a personal tension, really, surrounding of what it means to be a Yemeni and what it means to be American in a context in which I'm no longer in Yemen, and as much as I want to forget Yemen, I find myself very much invested in remembering everything relating to it, in part because the United States has destroyed it effectively, continues actually to destroy it in some ways. But also Yemen is part of a region in which Arabs and Muslims have also been, for the past 20 years or more, in the post 9/11 context, and to be more particular, and in the greater span of the 20th century, to me broad, have been recipients of much of the US institutionalized forms of racism, discrimination, exclusion. Of course, they're not alone, but that has been really within the grand scheme of what I've been interested in. So my first book project was Arab Americans in Film. I don't know if you could see it here. The book was recently published in 2020.
Yeah, we can see it. And sorry to interrupt you. We have a surprise for all speakers. You'll be surprised by what we have to offer later on.
All right, stay tuned. So Arab Americans in Film, from Hollywood and Egyptian stereotypes to self-representation. It's one of several projects that I've done and I do, and really much of my focus is nonfiction. I don't do fiction as much as I want to do. Maybe at some point in my life, I find myself sucked into the world of nonfiction, in a sense, because I sense the urgency to respond to so much of the pressures that I have faced personally, and my communities and the people, that intersected with my communities have experienced in a way. So even though it's non-fictional, this book project, I started my introduction with a very personal tone, or with a very personal note that I'd like to read, if you all don't mind, and I'll also give you a quick sense of the personal note underlining my second book project. I'm not going to read there are two moments that basically informed this book, The Arab Americans in Film. And it's a book that basically critiques Hollywood and Egyptian cinema, and how both industries have used their nationalist discourse in reducing the idea of Arab Americans to sound bites of stereotypes, basically. In the case of Hollywood, Arab Americans appear, for the most part, really as terrorists, as, yes, Roxana, in line of what Shaheen has done in his books. The Arab Americans have always been presented as terrorists, as foreigners, as conspirators, as un-American in a way. The question is of, there are constant questions in Hollywood of their belonging to this context in a way. And what Egyptian cinema has done has really looked at Arab Americans as either Arabs or Americans. And what I've seen happening in the context of my book is that both industries have used their nationalist understandings of identity to pass on their own understandings of what Arab Americans should look like, as opposed to the multi-complexities of what it means to be an Arab American to begin with. So I started by saying that, and I'm going to read now, two moments collided and produced this work. The first is personal, the second is political. I'm not going to talk about the political one. The personal moment draws from my experience as an Arab American of Yemeni background, constantly wrestling with American, Yemeni, Arab, and Muslim narratives of belonging and citizenship. In my travels, I have encountered conflicting public attitudes and government policies, pre-configured to define me and confine my identity within a specific national, ethnic, or even religious frame. During trips to Malaysia, Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, Qatar, for United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Yemen over the past few years, people would often question me about US foreign policy towards Arabs and Muslims. The impetus for such questions in most cases was not so much interest in my scholarship, but rather a desire to read my responses through the prism of allegiance. My interlocutors sought to package me as either an American or a Yemeni, identities implicitly presumed to be incompatible. The Yemen place of birth line in my American passport presents a special challenge for government officials in many of these countries because they are forced to treat me simultaneously as a Yemeni and an American. In the meantime, my return to the United States in the aftermath of every overseas trip has involved an additional layer of security, whether before boarding in Tokyo, London, Dubai, Doha, and Amman, or when landing in Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Shout out to Chicago. The SSS, the Trump 4S is, I guess, designation on my boarding passes, which stands for Secondary Security Screening Selection, speaks of an institutional anxiety around my ethnic background and conflates it with a potential act of terrorism. This anxiety stretches across the globe via a US mandate of national security, which locates individuals like me at the periphery of American citizenship. That mandate grows out of a post-9/11 paranoia that continues to shape the experiences of first-generation immigrants and Americans of Middle Eastern and South Asian backgrounds. The transnational nature of my personal encounters made me curious to explore meanings of Arab American citizenship and belonging in a globalized but fractured world. But it was a political moment that solidified it further, of course, right? So basically, what I'm saying in this book is basically I'm narrating my personal challenge as an immigrant, back and forth, moving between the United States and many parts of the Arab and Muslim worlds, in as much as how I'm being read, right, by people in different contexts, whether these people are officers in airports or regular people, right, and how each brings their own assumptions and presumptions into my sense of being and identity. Everybody brings their own presumptions to, and I can also impose their own sense of understandings of what I should be along the way, right? And somehow my experiences somehow have ranged from extreme forms of dismissal to a sense of critique of what I should be and what I should, how I should present myself. So my experiences somehow made it harder for me to develop this universal sense of me that I always like to present and think and conceive of. And as I challenge also nationalist restrictions of, in as much as how not only governments but also sites of cultural productions like Hollywood, for example, tend to project on citizens and individuals like me. I want to conclude with the last book project, just because in the interest of time, and I don't want to take everybody's time here. It's an exciting day, and I want to make sure everybody gets to celebrate it too. My second book, which I'm already writing as of now, the title of that work is From Drones to Travel Bans: U.S. Violence and Yemeni Visual Narratives of Resistance. And what I do in this work really is on the one hand, I'm trying to capture the legacy of war and terror in the context of Yemen. To what extent have the United States government produced violations, I would say, had violated Yemeni lands, lives, and rights, whether directly by using the drone program, targeted killing programs, or indirectly by imposing a foreign policy that is very much interventionist, that made it harder for Yemeni revolutionaries during 2011, which was part of the Arab Spring wave of democratic sort of protests, to fully articulate. You know, the United States in 2011, for example, interfered right away and downsized the revolution to a political crisis, and somehow forced a transition that made it worse for the country and produced conditions for disaster later on. And when a war broke out later on in 2015, that witnessed the invasion of foreign militaries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the United States again has supported such missions, whether directly by providing mid-air fueling, by providing logistical support, or indirectly by covering diplomatically much of the chaos that's unfolding in Yemen. And when it comes to Yemeni Americans, they have faced an array of policies that have made it harder for them to live a life in which they fully articulate their meanings of their citizenship, if you like. Policies that range from racial profiling to surveillance to policing, FBI and law enforcement infiltrations, direct murder of Yemeni Americans within the context of war and terror. So much violations happening. So what I'm trying to do in this book, I'm trying to consolidate this acts of violence that's happened on Yemen in the past 20 years, and add to that another layer in as much as how Hollywood itself has also committed some sort of symbolic violence by erasing Yemen. And Yemen's ancient history by erasing Yemen from the conversation and projecting Yemen exclusively as a land of terrorists and a land that somehow is only and exclusively worth mentioning if there's something relates to terrorism, which is not the case with Hollywood only, it's a case of media in general. So that's the one part of the book. The second part is really what I'm trying to feature visual artists, Yemeni and Yemeni American visual artists, from political cartoonists to street artists to fine artists to different range of photographers, and I'm trying to see to what extent they have produced a narrative of resistance, to say the least. So I'm trying to juxtapose U.S. hard power and Yemeni soft power, if you like. I'm trying to see how much of that juxtaposition unfolds in a way that makes me want to present a very coherent narrative. It's an archiving project, and that's why I'm saying I have to remember, right? And for me, it's not about forgetting, it's about actively remembering, because there's so much that needs to be documented and archived and narrated for the whole, for future generations, I guess. So I start the book with a very personal story, and it's just one paragraph, so I'm not gonna make it long. So I start with a reflection on what I was doing on the day of September 11, 2001, I'm sorry, because that was the most thing that people asked or people tried to reflect on. Was the question is, where were you on 9/11, right? Where were you on 9/11? That made it very easy for so much narrations of loss, of anxiety, of grief, that at the backdrop of which I was not a child, yeah, for sure. So anyway, on September 11, 2001, I was in my house in Taiz University in Yemen, glued to my television in hopes of making sense of the unfolding tragedy, because it was evening time in Yemen. Little did I know how this act of violence, remote as it seemed to me, would soon haunt Yemen through direct and indirect forms of US violence, resulting only 15 years later in my house ruined, my family displaced, and my community devastated. Starting my junior year in the Department of English at Taiz University in 2001, I was already drawn to US history and culture, despite the limits of my English language proficiency. My motivation to do so was a curiosity to learn about the United States beyond Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations theorization of an imminent clash between a Christian West and a Muslim East, a viewpoint that I could not accept in my high school years, since I was wrapped by a desire to think of globalization as the venue for me to become a global citizen. In 2007, I received a Fulbright scholarship funded by the US Department of State, which allowed me to pursue my graduate study and enhance my knowledge of the complexity of US Arab cultural politics. A few years later, I became an American citizen and was welcomed as an academic at US universities. My personal story reflects the perplexing intertwinement of the US deployment of soft and hard powers in my life, which on the one hand extended support for my intellectual journey, but not without post 9/11 challenges, of course, surrounding my American self. And on the other hand, contributed to conditions of violence on my Yemeni self. And that's how I start my book by placing myself and exhibiting my story as one that is perplexed by this simultaneous deployment of hard and soft power on the part of the US, and to what extent my story and this specific project represents some sort of response to much of that. I think I'd like to stop here since I took more than needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Walid. This has been amazing. You're just such an amazing scholar. I love everything you write. I've been following you and reading your work with great pleasure. I want to ask my own question, but before I do that, I want to give a chance to those in the audience to ask their questions. Please raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself, but I would only ask that you wait until the person before you finishes talking before you unmute yourself to talk. Thank you. So we'll give a minute for people to collect their thoughts. I'm keeping an eye on the Zoom chat in Facebook Live. You have a comment from Julie Polescu, says, very interesting and relevant reflections on hybrid identities, Walid. So thank you for that. We'll see. Well, how about I get us started? And I'm asking my question. You spoke about, the need to remember, the need to document, the need to archive, to narrate, to, allow all these stories that are either invisible or unknown or, muted over by wider discourses created by we know who, right? I wonder what you think. I mean, it is clear that you know your role in dismantling, right, these misrepresentations or these erasures. What do you think our role as audience members, as readers of your work, as listeners in this conversation, readers of Domnika's work, listeners of Anna's music, and so on, what is our role in dismantling these wrongful representations or misrepresentations or gaps, covering the gaps?
Yeah, thank you so much, Roxana, and I appreciate that question, as hard as it seems, right? Because in part, we live in a very fragmented, if you think about it, society in the US, and in which it's easier to be comfortable in one's ethnic enclave, right? And that has been for quite some time the default, in my opinion. Although throughout history, there also been very exciting moments of solidarity emerging among different diaspora communities in projecting common narratives of resistance, and somehow exhibited demands that seemed unified in critiquing institutionalized forms of violence, institutionalized forms of racism, right? When I look at the Islamophobic discourse in this country, for example, recent of which the articulation was the President Donald Trump's travel ban, I couldn't help but look at the very long historical trajectory for that. And one of the scholars that I like goes by the name of Mustafa Bayoumi. He said a very interesting sentence at some point. He's a very prominent author. Please check him out if you're interested. He has a lot of beautiful writing. Yes, here you go. Roxana has the book. How does it feel to be a problem? And when she looks at post 9/11 discrimination against Arabs and Muslims, he said at some point, a very interesting point, that in the emancipation of Muslims in this country, there's an emancipation of us all in a way. And I would think about it not just it's in similar lines, Roxana, and that is it's not so much a story of how we should react to Yemenis or Arabs or Muslims or or South Asians or Eastern Europeans or Jews, like all these forms of experiences of discrimination. Is to what extent are we capable of thinking that one's experience of trauma, of violence, of discrimination is not operating in vacuum? And for one to be able to make sense of that experience, they need to think beyond their own personal trauma, beyond their own ethnic trauma, beyond their own religious trauma. My point is here, if I were to expect something from the audience at all, though it's, everybody has their own way of taking things, is that my hope that we'll be able to, when we understand and read these different contexts of violence, is to create a sense of empathy that allows us to not necessarily place ourselves in their foot, but somehow understand how much there's an interconnection in these different experiences of violence, as remote as things might be, because every community experience is different, right? But there's always that universal experience of discrimination, of institutionalized form of racism that makes it ever more challenging to fight alone. And so my hope, basically, at the end of the day, is that the audience would take my work as a sign of, as a case study of a community that there might be a need to extend compassion to, but at the same time think creatively about how to connect with. I hope that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're really highlighting that it's not just, we're not just receptacles, but we're also creators. We can be agents. We have a question in the chat. Chichi, do you want to ask it?
I've read the question, but I don't know if Chichi would like to say anything.
Yeah, if you want to ask it, Chichi, yourself, you can unmute yourself and do that. If not, I can present the question. There's this duality, in a way, a give and take between active violence against Yemen by the United States, but also this sort of like aid offered towards your education coming from the West. And how do you make sense of this duality, duplicity?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. Is really how do you make sense of U.S. deployment of hard power and soft power in the context not only of Yemen, in every country where there is a U.S. interest, there's a short answer, there's a long answer, right? I would say the short answer is this is not anything new, right? There's always, when it comes to U.S. global articulation of power, this has always been these various forms of engaging the world, right? Yes, hard power is always there. Militarized confrontations, deployment of tools, selling weapons, sending drones. Sometimes are very much there and have been used throughout history, right? But so has also been the threat of economic sanctions, which is a form of soft power. Cultural diplomacy. There's has always been an investment in Hollywood and acting in a global way to sell or mediate an American version or a vision of what America looks like, a fantasized version of America, if you like. There has always been investments in sending aids through US aid, for example, in investing in development, in presenting projects of support to zones, So the intertwinement of hard power and soft power has always been part of how the US operates globally. So there's nothing new there, right? I just should say that what's problematic about it is that whatever soft power is used, I mean, let's say the extent of foreign aid offered in terms of humanitarianism, in terms of building schools, building hospitals, building roads, you know, whatever, to the extent of development happening with US dollars, it will always be contingent on the other arm, you know, that is, to what extent is the US also very much invested in using its hard power, and to what extent is driving that threat to a country's collapse. So in the case of Yemen, for example, yes, the United States have done a great job in promoting democracy, in sending hundreds of millions of dollars to support humanitarian causes throughout, you know, the decades. But since 9/11, I would say the emerging discourse of security, of war and terror, have created a sense of urgency on the part of U.S. policymaking that conceived the promise of and the premise of a failing state as somehow represents a danger to U.S. national security, right? And so whatever was presented in terms of soft power to save Yemenis have also been conditioned, let's say, to the security discourse that made it harder for Yemenis themselves to advance without receiving constant dictates from the U.S. policymaker, whether that is you have to accept certain conditions, you have to allow for the sovereignty of the sky, Yemeni skies, to be violated, you have to step back and accept that whatever revolutionary demands you had during 2011, to quit those demands basically and accept whatever compromised political deal that the United States was willing to offer. You have to always be accepting a passive recipient, if you like, of US dictates. And so much of the beauty of the support unfortunately remains contingent on the will of the US in seeing the well-being of a country all the way through, right? And that one makes it harder for people like me, for individuals like me, right? On the one hand, I feel it's perplexing in a sense. On the one hand, I feel lucky, right? I got a Fulbright. It's funded by the Department of State. It's been there since 70s or 60s. It was like a Cold War program that was meant to bring the best and brightest. I'm not saying I'm the best and brightest, but bring the best and brightest of the world to America, get them familiarized with this context, send them back to their countries, and maybe hopefully they become then agents of change for America, right? I mean, the Fulbright itself, which I was part of, is itself a political program, right? But at the same time, everything that the US has done in the past 2 decades at least have ruined me, you know. So I would say basically my American self was very much nurtured by the US government, but my Yemeni self has been destroyed and ruined, let's put it that way. So the intertwinement of hard power and soft power in me personally has taken place at this American side and Yemeni side, right? And one side seems nurtured, the other side seems ruined. I just should end it there, I guess. I could speak about this for
Absolutely, Walid. This was it was an excellent answer, and I just, you know, I identify very much with what you said, of course, in a completely different context. But this idea of conditional acceptance, right, for immigrants, or we also talk about the push and pull, right, with immigrants, that you're constantly in this schizophrenic, if you will, kind of like state. I see a hand up, Dominika.
Yes, thank you so much, Walid. Your story reminds me of a student of mine was Algerian, and her parents were living in New York at the time of 9/11, and her father was just arrested off the street. He was a math teacher at the high school 2 days after September 11, just so because he was Algerian. But what I want to say is that I wrote this in the chat, that I so appreciate you using your personal story, and I sense, I don't know, maybe I'm making it up a little bit, but that you might have a little bit of a reticence in using personal story. But I want to say that I'm hoping that you're going to theorize more and more out of your own experience and practice, because there is extraordinary power in that. And frankly, I think that the academic world has a certain violence in how it tries to squish personal stories because of its push to be, for everything to be theorized and theoretical. And for instance, recently I listened to a wonderful talk about Black abolitionists, feminist abolitionists, that deals with women, Black women in incarceration and carcerality. And it is all of the theories, so many of them are based precisely and are emerging from real stories, from personal stories, because there is a world-making power, new world-making power in telling personal stories and then unfolding them and recrafting them into theory so that then they can go back into practice. And I think you have a gold mine there, and I'm congratulating you, and I'm very grateful and excited about your work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dominica. I appreciate your thoughts and reflections here. And there's always a challenge, by the way, when it comes to publishing. And I get what you said earlier, right? There's always this back and forth challenges with publishers. And expectations, since academic manuscripts go through anonymous peer review process, then you're left to the discretion of your peers who you don't know. And they likely know you when it comes to book, but you don't know them, right? And depending on them, right, how they see your personal story, right? Sometimes there is that back and forth, and I've seen it somehow happening with my first book, by insistence that I would rather foreground my personal story than start with dense references to literature review. That really, it's important, and I still feature it throughout my book, but I would rather foreground my personal story rather than start by highlighting what has been accomplished before me by other scholars, right? So that's sometimes dynamic that makes it quite a challenge when it comes to foregrounding your personal narrative, as opposed to scholars seeing the importance of you foregrounding other people's works in how you present things, you know. But that's a very good line of thought, is to what extent I should extend my personal story into a theoretical framework, right? And make sense of it in a bigger way. Actually, this inspires me further as I write this book. Thank you so much, Dominica.
Great. Any other questions? I'm looking for hands up or for questions typed in the chat, or for people unmuting themselves to ask the question. Now is your time. All right, well, if you can think of anything later on, please don't hesitate to type that question in the chat, leave a note for us on Facebook. Thank you so much, Walid, for being here with us. And I'm gonna switch the pace now and move on in the interest of time to the next act in our symposium. Welcome to Alina Ștefănescu. I didn't click something here. There we go. Alina Ștefănescu, our next speaker. This is my screen. Let me briefly introduce wonderful Alina as well. Can you see my screen? Okay, yeah. Alina Ștefănescu was born in Romania and lives in Birmingham, Alabama. She's a poet, writer, translator, and essayist whose work can be found in literary journals, including Prairie Schooner, North American Review, World Literature Today. And I'm saying that because both Walid and I know that that's at the University of Oklahoma. Pleiades, Poetry Bomb, Crab Creek Review, and various anthologies, including Best American Poetry 2022, edited by Matthew Zapruder. What Things Cost, an anthology for the people. Stronger Than Fear, The Best Small Fictions, Choice Words, Writers on Abortion, Writers Resist Anthology, For Love of Orcas Anthology, and annual anthologies from Orison Press and Bending Genres. Her debut fiction collection, Every Mask I Tried On, won the Bright Horse Prize and was published in May 2018. Her short prose chapbook, Ribald, was published by Bull City Press in 2020. Her poetry collection, Dor, won the 2020 Wandering Angus Book Prize and was published in 2021. Alina's first poetry chapbook, Objects in Vases, won the 2016 award for Poetry Book of the Year from ASPS. Her hybrid collection, Stories to Read Aloud to Your Fetus, explores how we write, imagine, and inhabit wombed bodies. She won the 2019 River Heron Poetry Prize, and her current poetry manuscript was selected as one of 3 finalists by Major Jackson for the 2021 Alice Day de Castagnola Award from the Poetry Society of America. When she's not writing, teaching workshops, or working for money, Alina serves as poetry editor for Pigeonholes, critic for various journals, President Emerita of Alabama State Poetry Society, board member of the Alabama Writers Cooperative, co-director of PEN's America's Birmingham chapter, co-founder of 100,000 Poets for Change Birmingham, board member for Magic City Poetry Festival, and member of National Association of Book Critics and American Literary Translators Association. Welcome, Alina. I will drop in the chat a link to her website as well. And I'm going to stop the share so we can see Alina.
Thank you so much, Roxana. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, and I'm going to pin your spotlight right here so we can all
That bio was so embarrassing and I just cringe. Some of it is probably not true anymore, and it reminded me that I need to update it, but it's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to have heard some of the really thoughtful discussions that preceded the attempt that I'm going to make to present a memoir workshop in 45 minutes. So I have a slideshow, and I wanted to start with that. I wanted to start with a quote from a Russian writer, actually. Lately, there's been
Alina, I'm going to share your PowerPoint. Let me just drop your link to your website here in the chat. I did that on Facebook as well. And I'm going to share the screen with your PowerPoint, okay?
Okay. And
here we go. This is it. Share. There we go. Can you all see it?
So, yeah. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to start with that quote, which is, and now it's from Konstantin Faustovsky's The Story of a Life, which was recently released by NYRB. And in it, he quotes something as he's talking about his own life. He says, and now, as actors of old used to say to the audience, before the play begins, we shall present to you various incidents from real life, and we should try to make you reflect upon them, to make you laugh, and to make you cry. You could close it, Roxana. Thank you. You can close it. I'll just stay. Yeah, I'll just stay with it. Okay. So I really like that quote because I think a lot of times when we're writing and speaking now, writing fiction, writing poetry, writing memoir, when you are doing creative writing, we often restrict ourselves from absurdity, we try to tell a very clean story in which there's a hero and it's probably us or our family or whatever. We have a very limited view of the narrative self. And Domnika's wonderful recent memoir does not. So I just want to note that it does not. It presents a complicated self. And I think that is liberating, but also difficult to write. So what I want to do is focus on how to write into a space for writers who are creative writers and for writers who are not. I think the truth can be inhibiting. When we hear the word the truth, it is something that it is not in line with the development of generative and resilient relationships to truths, okay? The writer who looks back has to abandon the truth unless they are writing a book that is an ideology, for example, or a new religion, and that in which case, the truth, they can write it. That's what they're doing. That's their job. The truth is the handmaiden of dictators, demagogues, theocrats, and tyrants throughout history. A sustainable relationship to truth requires humility, acknowledging that truth is subjective, variable, context dependent, as well as source dependent. So cultivating a relationship to truths rather than attempting to sanctify a single truth sets reality and curiosity before ego. And this is how we begin, by opening our minds to the unthinkable, the vast, the extraordinary, and the details left out by the official truth manufacturing accounts. Writing creative nonfiction requires us to access the past, but we can't do this if we stand in our own way. The first-person speaker on the page in a memoir is not omniscient. They are a character on the page. They are a persona that performs for the reader. It does not include every aspect of their lives or every thought. And some speakers may be emphatic, others are boisterous, others choose to seduce the reader through details and descriptions. But the page creates us as we create it. And the speaker on the page is choosing what to create. And I'm interested in this word confabulation. Has anyone heard? I'm sure Mihaela has heard that. So I'm really interested because I think a lot of times when we go into the therapist's office, confabulation is the thing to avoid, right? When you're writing as a creative writer, confabulation is actually what you accept about the nature of memory. You accept that there is no single memory, that memory is rewired every time neurologically, and that the speaker is subject to the varieties of memory. So confabulation, the word comes from the Latin fabula, a story, a fable, which can be either a historical account or a fairy tale. And to confabulate, when we confabulate, we're telling a story that is fictional, but we believe it to be a true story. So if you've ever heard a grandparent telling you a story about the family, which changes every year, gets new details every year, but when they tell it, that is a true story. Okay, you could say they are confabulating. They are not actually offering facts on the ground. They are offering a story, a narrative that provides an explanation of the world as they know it. And that world changes sometimes, gains new details, loses some. We tend to confabulate when we're asked to explain our choices because we don't always know the factors responsible for our choices. So this is the difference between writing in one's journal and writing for an audience, okay? In your journal, you can think through things, you can question things. When you're writing for an audience, that's not really so much the space to explore all your feelings. I would say that the notebook is a really good place for that. And I'm an avid devotee of the notebook. We want to make things sound logical. We want a linear narrative to explain things. So, for example, if we don't know why we kept a secret from a friend or why we sold another friend's secret to a friend, we will invent or rationalize it by saying that person was a bad person or I did it out of love. We often do that so that we can function through the day, do all the things we have to do, and also have a livable self-concept. We want to retain a positive self-image at all times as humans. The writer, alone in a room, gives that up. If you can't give that up, it's difficult to come to the page, honestly, in earnesty, okay? Because the first thing you have to question is that perfect self that you maintain. I think we are aware of our motivation sometimes. I think therapists help us with that. I think notebooks do, but I think a lot of times we're not. I don't think we can afford to live as the 24-hour self-aware self and also juggle the incredible labor of childcare in capitalism, the costs of healthcare, the costs of life, the costs of food, the cost. I don't think that's genuinely possible for anyone except a few billionaires, you know, that's just not realistic, right? So we struggle, we do our best. No one is perfect. That's okay. But the coherent self that we want and that we carry through life that helps gets us through life is also, everyone else has their own coherent self. And I want to just distinguish between the eye of the page and the coherent self. So I'm going to say this again. The eye of the page is someone else. It is not you, even if you think it is you when you're writing creatively. Knowing that this I is someone else requires humility. when I am looking, for example, at the audience of whatever I'm writing, it's going to be strangers. If I'm writing a poem or an essay, that's an audience of strangers. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to someone else. And that person, I don't know who they will be or what they will think, right? But I come from that space. So one of the most important things that I have to leave at the door, and that I think is really good for notebooks and really terrible for everything else, or for therapists, is envy. I think envy is probably the most toxic relationship or toxic way of thinking that exists. And I think capitalism exacerbates it. I think meritocracy exacerbates it, ironically. I think it's deeply problematic. And there is no space for creativity with envy. It's not a creative emotion, it's a destructive one. So you can't see the other in humans, you can't respect or honor or thou them when you're coming from envy. And so that's a really good theme to leave to the side when you're trying to write, or to push to the side, or to deal with before you come to the page, trying to sort, something difficult in the human self. So I want to move really quickly to the child voice and the what is it about childhood and the child self, because a lot of times immigrant writers talk about wanting how their child self was in Romania or somewhere else, and their grown self is here, and there's this like weird way in which the two interact. What's unique about the child voice is that it's a voice that doesn't really know what it wants to say. It's a vulnerable voice.
Side eye.
Sorry. For the most part. It's an undefensive voice. It's a space in which the human speaks to the human in all their brokenness and vulnerability. Rachel Carson, the environmentalist writer who did an incredible amount of prescient work in the 1950s and 60s, spoke of it as a sense of wonder. In fact, she wrote a children's book that was illustrated. It's one of my favorite parenting books. It's just pictures of nature. And she said, she focused on the way that the child inhabits the world differently. The child has a relationship with the tree that they climb.
Michaela, you looking real fine right now.
With the scent of that bark and with the particular location and the place. And at the time, Rachel Carson in the 1950s was worried about the impact of television on kids not forming relationships with nature. Little did she know the challenges we would have in the present, where a mediated relationship, one with a screen, is not the same as knowing a leaf in real life. It's easier to lose something you've had on a screen and in some game world than it is to lose the scent of a tree that you formed a relationship with. So although she never married or had biological children, on an interesting note, Rachel Carson wrote with an extreme amount of empathy and compassion for women who were at that time being forced to raise kids under the 1950s capitalism, because of the labor, because of the impossible ideals. And she wrote out of love for children. She believed children would change the world. And I think any society that doesn't believe that about its children or hold their children in that regard is damned ahead of time. I think we damn ourselves very, very much. Ironically, she ended up raising her, I think it was a nephew, Roger, when he was orphaned at the age of 5. She raised him for 7 years before she died very young of breast cancer. But she was a mother to him, right? And was an excellent mother. He remembers her with great
skill
love.
issue.
So to value the child in others, to look at children as something valuable, is also to value the child in ourselves. Unlike the adult whose authority and sense of self is invested in certainty, the child speaks from the position of not knowing, or from being too young to know. The child feels a relationship with the plum tree, as in Herta Müller, the candle wax, the silent patches and conversations between adults. Carmen Bugan, her incredible memoir about Romania and about her parents' life under Ceausescu, does such an excellent job of giving and offering this child voice that observes, witnesses, notes details. Very rarely does it intrude with ideas of justice, etc., in the middle of the narration. There's no distraction, no use of words that signify status, and those words are status signifiers to some degree in our current culture. So it's a haunted world, and it's a difficult world, but it is a world in which she respects the voices of the older people, brings them in, and weaves all these voices together in a sort of discord that feels very real. So the takeaway from that brief blabbing that I just did is that approach the child self when you're writing with a sense of wonder. Approach you when you're writing you from the outside. Write you as a student of you. Look at that person, look at that child. Look at who you were and write from there. I'm sorry, that is my dog Radu, and he's awful. He's terrible. You'll probably hear him. There's someone passing, so he has to talk. The self is complicated, right? It's fragmented, and it's not going to fit. We have to lie some. We have to confabulate some to fit it all together. That's the truth. We're not very consistent. We're not as consistent as we want. We are performing one self in one room, a different self in another room. People who see us across rooms might think, but you seem so this way there and this way there. Well, yes, life is complicated. People are complicated. Looking back in my life now to do the justice that I should do, given that others have started from the personal and I did not. Looking back in my life, the most important stories that my mom ever told me took place on the back porch at our house, all in Romanian, when she would only in Romanian, and she would pour hot wax on my legs and then slowly rip it off as she told me about the men she had dated in Romania before my dad, about what life was like there, etc. These were private conversations, right, between two women. The reason that they happened was because, in a sense, they pivoted around the fact that my mom would not let me shave my legs because she would not let me be like the girls in the American school, and also because only Communist Party people could get razors in Romania and all these ideas that she had, whereas wax you could get anywhere. So she had all this different, like stuff that she brought, that was her baggage, but also because that's how she and her own mother bonded. She bonded with me in the language she knew. For my friends, they were like, oh my gosh, that is so traumatic. You have been so traumatized. Your mother made you go through physical pain and what my friends don't understand, and why this word trauma is so almost overdetermined these days, just almost useless, is that I miss that time. I miss that so much. I miss that closeness. It hurt at first, but it was exciting to be in that with my mom. Some people, like to skydive. This is no different in a way. My mom, I remember her, she would talk and she would press down hard and teach me to press down hard. And then I would pull it off her leg. And we did this to each other. So, it's an intimacy in which those stories were transmitted. And that childhood took place in another land inside Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where everything was Romanian and spoken in Romanian. And I kept those two worlds separate, the world of my outside and the world of my inside. My home was a language, right? And that language spoke of this other land that my parents had left and the family that was abroad. Haitian-American author Edwidge Danticat, who is incredible, has said that the best writing teachers in her childhood couldn't read or didn't. The storytellers of her childhood carried stories like treasures inside of them, and they were women of the family. Both of Edwidge's parents left Haiti to go and work at sub-minimal conditions in US factories. And so she was raised in Haiti by her aunts and her grandparents. And she lived for when her mother's letters would come. She imagined her mother. This was a decade of time away from her parents. She imagined her mother through those letters, through her mother's words. But then the aunts and grandmothers filled in the space of the rest of her mother's absence with stories. And these stories would come as they were braiding her hair, as they were cooking. They were part of what you call kitchen stories, right? Those are such rich repositories. Such rich repositories. And I think sometimes we worry about sounding traditional or reifying tradition if we mention these complex experiences of people who lived, in a much less privileged position than we are in. I really appreciate why keep mentioning, acknowledging the fact that it's difficult to navigate the privilege of being an immigrant in the US, especially because so many immigrants in the US, especially from Eastern Europe, are here because of academic visas. Everyone knows it's not really going to the people who are poor and who need it most. It's going to the people with the college degrees that can come and help out at a university. That's what we know, at least about Romania immigration quotas, right? And those truths are real too. I think we have to acknowledge them and write with them, not fear them. So no story belongs only to us. And if stories are witnesses, then the witness is the person who notices. The writer is the person who notices. The witness is not the propagandist who is writing a new tome that can, save the world. That's not a witness, that's a theorist. The witness is the quiet observer, the child who watches why everyone else gets in a lap, but they don't, right? And they understand finally that their parents don't have enough laps for everyone, right? There's not enough laps. And so then the question is, do you blame your parents for that for forever? There weren't enough laps. There were only 2 of them, right? Or do you do the more complicated work of seeing your parents as human beings who struggled, right? And who were human and honoring the humanity in them. So now just if you have a pen or a pencil, we're just going to do a couple of quick things. If you have a pen, I'm just going to do I'm going to time you for a minute. You're just going to take a couple of notes, okay? And we're basically working in the form called the micro memoir or micro creative nonfiction. And it takes a memory, a small memory usually, and makes a paragraph or a bulk or a small thing of it. I'm really excited because I'm going to be using a book that is officially not out yet, Rombo by Esther Kinsky. It's coming out in March, I think, from NYRB. So I'm excited to be able to share it with everyone here because it's an incredible book. And the way that Kinsky structures it is basically a bunch of micro memoirs in different sections. And she manages to weave together an entire story about an earthquake in Italy. Yes, I will. I also have, by the way, y'all, I went ahead and made PDFs of my notes with links inside them and all of the writing suggestions and assignments and links to books, etc. That is 11 pages long and that I will give to Roxana after this that she can share with everyone that wants it, just in case you want to sit at home and have your own thoughts with this. So as we go through each of these short writing prompts, I just want you to think about details, images, and objects. I want you to imagine a museum of the self that is not a museum of the American self, not the selling self. Stop selling yourself for a minute, my immigrant friends. Okay, 1 minute. And take the self, not in its abstraction, but in its intimate tendernesses. Consider yourself, the person is a character that you're studying and watching, right? We, as Romanians, know or should know that no one is innocent and no one is perfect. Sometimes we fly over into the United States and we suddenly think that it's a possibility, which is crazy. I don't know how anyone can do that, but people do. We know, for example, that living under Ceausescu meant parrying favors with the Communist Party. We know that some joined and some didn't, but everybody lived in a world where they were trying to survive and trying to give their children the best thing that they could give their children, just like here. And some had access to vacations and freedom, and a lot of that depended on party connections. But there's no, those fights that happen in the Romanian diaspora are just really, I think we should all come from the position of presuming that what Václav Havel said, we are all guilty. The blood is on all of our hands, okay? So really quick now, I'm gonna give you 60 seconds and I want you to look back at the self you were at 13 years old. Look back at 13. How did that person look? What were they wearing? What did they treasure or value? What did they misunderstand about the world or their families? Take a minute, 2 minutes to jot down details, but also to add 2 questions that you would ask that 13-year-old today. I'll put that in the chat. I'll copy and paste it and put it in the chat for you all. So. Okay, time up. That's 2 minutes. So for the next one, go back to your 16th birthday. If you remember your 16th birthday, what you were doing when you were 16 on that day that was supposed to be your birthday or your name day, whichever was more celebrated in your family. Look back at that person as a character and think of 5 details, list 5 details from that day. What that person was wearing, what they ate, what they heard when family gathered or when family didn't gather, what that person feared most. 5 particular details rather than abstractions. Nothing like I was sad, because sad, everyone at 16 is sad. Come on, y'all. You know, something, a detail from that time, right? That does justice to the particularity of the person. Okay. So I'm going to stop you now. Hold on to that. And again, thinking of the memoir as the things that we preserved or found worthy of preserving. Memories have associated artifacts or objects. There's a great book by Judith Shalansky called Inventory of Losses, which has this wonderful description of different artifacts that were lost. Maria Stepnova uses artifacts in her excellent history of her Soviet Jewish family. And she goes back and tries to retell the story of who they were. So going again to this self, which I would call the museum of the eye, write down 5 artifacts or objects that mattered to you as a child, okay? That mattered to you then. Toys, maybe, things, signs in a neighborhood, places. Just 5 really quick things. It could be a book. Maybe there was a book that you loved. Okay. Roxana, if we could look at that slideshow again. I'm sorry, I should have tried to do it.
No, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much. If you fast forward through this one, and I think you can click on the picture that is the full so it doesn't distract people. Yeah, fast forward through.
How do I do that? Slideshow.
Yeah. Okay, now maybe pressing. Okay, we'll let you stop there. Okay, perfect. Yay. All right, so now I'm going to go into using literary forms to preserve artifacts of self, and also cut me off when my time is exhausted. Okay. So looking again at this novel, and I've included PDF copies of how Esther does this, but I just want to read here, and I think a lot of this might resonate with those who were in Romania during the earthquakes of 1977. 10 more minutes, thank you. Okay, this is how Esther Kinsky writes. The seismic shocks of May divided life and the landscape into a before and after. The before was the object of memory, stories unceasingly layered and blown over by words. One argued the form of the cliffs, the course of the brooks, the trees that avalanches rolled over. About the whereabouts of objects, the orders of things in the house, the fate of the animals. Each of these arguments was an attempt at orientation, at carving a path through the rubble of masonry, mortar, split beams, and shattered dishes to understand the world anew, to begin living in a place anew with one's memories. So I think to the next one then, if it lets you. Okay, the next one. All right, so this is an excerpt from Esther Kinsky's Ramba, which is a novel about an Italian village destroyed by an earthquake. The author herself is German. What's intriguing to me is that the villagers speak a Slavic language, and the scene reminded me very much of a Transylvanian village. So I want to look at how she writes and frames in order to communicate complexity in these short micro, you could say micro memoirs. You could say they're not her memoirs, but she's writing history from this micro in order to communicate the ways of that time in the village and what was lost by the small rural village when the earthquake came. Her book is also about migrant labor, about the loss of village life, about the cost, about globalization and neoliberalism. It's a wonderful book, but it approaches it from the side. It's not an ideological tract, it's literature, and it does an excellent job of creating compassion for the people who have lost a lot. So looking at it, a fable of the region goes like this. So she goes through here and then she says, an animal finds a letter. She picks up these village stories. That's one. Okay, next page. So notice how she titles it Fable. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing. So, and then finishing that, as if someone had called out his name, the goldfinch also appears. So it ends with a riddle. Then she puts in the next section is memory. Monte Carlo, which is the area that they're talking about, is a limestone massif. She describes it geologically. Interesting part where she says, babe are women, canine is a tooth, a dog tooth, pointy and rough and a bit crooked. In winter, the snow hangs thinly in the shallow crooked fissures on the south side, and on the east side, it lies blue into summer, the shadow of the peak. So these women are named babe, which I know that Romanians will also recognize as a landmark in Romania, but I was interested in how she uses these landmarks. Okay, next page. Thank you, Roxana. Then she has a person speak. So there's several speakers that describe what happened and their memories of this earthquake. And each of them will come back in the book in these short paragraphs. So Olga, what is memory? Comes and glows as it pleases. It disappears and intrudes and we can't do anything about it. I see the wall. I remember the carbon. I remember the carbon. And my memory of the earthquake returns. Just like that, everything is connected and interwoven. So you could hear the trauma that she's describing, right? You can hear the flashback entering, but she doesn't call it that. I hear chickens and think of my childhood in Venezuela, of the sweet fragrant tree in the yard and spots of sun on the floor. Everything has changed, but all this is still there. Memory. Next. Is something that is being forever woven. All that we see and hear and think and smell, everything is like a thread in this woven cloth of memory. The cloth becomes longer and longer. In old age, it is so long it would practically stretch the valley's length, all folded tightly in one's head. And the blood in one's veins courses over it ceaselessly. And tiny threads come loose and wash up someplace else. And so soon you forget, but it's still lying somewhere in your head. Yes, what is memory? We ourselves are memory. Then she slits again into a description of the landscape. And okay, next page. I'm not going to read it all because I don't think we have time. Here's a different speaker. So Anselmo, all of the speakers are responding to what happened. What do you remember of the earthquake or afterwards? They're describing the village, the landscape. The shepherds are describing the routes they took. The routes are gone. The shepherds are gone. They bring in memory is like Anselmo now speaks. Memory is like a shadow. It follows you wherever you go. And if you had none, perhaps you would be left standing there as awkward as without a shadow, like the story about the man who sold his shadow. Whoever sells their shadow goes through the world, not leaving a trace. And then it, goes on into Anselmo's description. Notice how the diction, we could stop right there. Notice how the diction in this, in the text is simple, right? It's not attempting to be complicated. It doesn't have complicated sentence structure. It again speaks very, I use the word childlike because I don't have a better way or a better sort of description of that sort of narrative voice. That is just describing, observing, listing, combining legends with memories, with landscape, with practices. So that is what I think is really helpful about this particular book. And in the handout, there's a writing prompt that goes through with you on how to do this for a city that you remember from Romania or a city here. And basically shows you how to use this structure. You pick, if you're doing Brașov, for example, one section would be Biserica Neagră, and then you describe so-and-so. Then you would have the street lamp where Radu first kissed me is another section, right? Leather sandals is another section, maybe something geological, maybe a flower. But this gives you a tremendous flexibility, I think, in trying to organize and imagine your thoughts in a more complicated narrative. And I want to leave some time for questions. So I will stop there in order to.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I was mesmerized by this metaphor of memory as this like long cloth that is neatly packed and folded somewhere, but you don't really have access to all of it really, because it's way too long and the folds are too pressed, or maybe when you leave a cloth in a closet for too long, then the moths kind of like take a bite and then it's all full of holes and it's no longer like straightforward or I don't know, structured as it was. And it ties in really what Dominika said about memory and also what Walid said about memory, that the need to remember, but also the need to forget, the need to have those folds. You know, you need the cloth there, but you need it the way it is for you. And yours might be more folded or more mothy.
And I think part of the challenges for me, at least when I'm sitting down to write memory, is that I want to include everything. I feel like I'm lying if I don't include every detail. And you can't, friends, you cannot. Dominika will tell you, like, you cannot. And so you have to agree that you're telling a story, and you have to step back from that person on the page and say, I cannot complete you. I cannot make you me. Okay. And so I'm going to allow this person to tell this story that is a true story, but it's not true it's not a journalism. It's not, you know, functioning as journalism. It's not an academic paper. It's a piece of creative work. And the creativity is there too, just like the creativity of a grandmother telling, you know, those stories. We often tend to really look down on oral culture, I think. And I think that's a facet of our, you know, how we acquire status in, you know, the present culture. But I noticed that in myself, and I'm very ashamed of it. I'm very conscious of it and very critical of it. And yeah, so.
Great, thank you. Let's see, hands up or questions.
Ask me anything. Thank you, Mihaela. What's the mess?
We have a hand up. Let me just see who that person is. Dominika.
Sorry, only if because I've been speaking a lot and asking questions. Maybe if somebody else wants to ask first that has not had a chance to talk, I would give my.
Why don't you go ahead and jump in, Dominika? And
Okay. I want to say, Alina, that it's beautiful exercise. Actually, I'm going to do it with my students next week. But when you said it can be quite traumatic, the exercise, if you realize, like I did when you said your 13-year-old self, that I couldn't have any one particular memory of my 13-year-old self. And 16, yeah, weird. And then so somewhere around 7 or 8, it's just this blocks that I was talking about. And it's very panic inducing to me, because I feel like I've lost a part of myself. But then fiction that comes to my rescue always, because I think it's what I've done a lot, even in my memoir, is that I invent memories. And at some point, I believe that it's true. And, you know, it could be that somewhere deep, viscerally, it is true. Like, for instance, when I wrote the escape scene of my heroine in Train to Trieste, that everybody thought is completely autobiographical, which is not. It's a completely invented scene, but I swear, I believe for sure that also I went through that experience. It felt so real. So I just wanted to share that the reaction I had, that I went through a real sort of panic-inducing moment. Then I calmed down with a 16-year-old self, because then I remembered, and then the earthquake definitely remember moments very clearly. But I'm just wondering in this exercise whether it has to be memorialistic, and we can do just what I just said, also inventing memory.
I think it's a wonderful question, and I'm so grateful to you for asking it. And it try not to cry. Shane McRae, poet Shane McRae, has a memoir coming out later this year about his experience as a interracial child kidnapped from his Black father by his white grandparents, whom he was raised by, and about what they raised him to believe, about what it's like. He doesn't remember his childhood. And the book is about him trying to remember and going back and looking at pictures and basically seeking the story of his own life with vague small memories. And he's constantly acknowledging, I don't know if this really, did this happen? Did this happen? And that traumatic memory, right? That amnesia that you're describing is so palpable in Shane's book, and it is very real, and it's very, there's no answer or no right or wrong that anyone could say, I think, about the story that you tell at that point, because you're speaking from the perspective of the person who survived it.
Yeah, and about the truthfulness, the whole, what you said so beautifully about truth, and about the obsession with true story, and a story that we imagined deeply from our from ourselves is as much a true story as a story that we actually went through. I believe that very strongly about the relativity, this beautiful fluidity of truth. That is not at all a monolith. It is the monolithic truths that are the bane of our existence.
Yes, and I think that is, always something I feel so strongly about some things. I feel so strongly about some issues of justice, and I have to really look at how ineffective that feeling is when I am bringing it and saying it rather than making a point that's more difficult, that forces people to look at it. And I think that's a struggle. In an academic paper, you can be very obvious about those things. When you're trying to seduce, and that's what writing is, writing seduces. It doesn't argue quite as much, it seduces when you're being creative. You have to get under you have to get into their most intimate space somehow and let them let you in. And it's hard. I think, I'm grateful that you mentioned the actual trauma that is involved. And that is why I think stepping back, I mentioned this, stepping back and seeing the person as separate. For me, that's how I deal with writing about things that are really hard, that I think need to be spoken or written, but I don't want to live inside that body in those moments. And so I look at her, I call her her, and it's fiction. Dominika, I call it fiction.
This is great. You've got a lot of great comments in the chat and hearts from our audience members. Thank you so much, Alina. If you can think of any questions further, please don't hesitate to leave them here in the message, in the chat, or email them to us. We'll be happy to get you an answer to them. Thank you so much. And to keep things going and get you out of here in a timely manner, I want to move to my last person here. If you can see my screen today in the presentation, there we go, I'm live. This is Julia Lieblich, and I wanted to introduce her because she has been the judge for our contest. Julia unfortunately cannot be with us today as she is doing research in Latin America in a place where she does not have internet. But I wanted to tell you about what an accomplished writer Julia is as well, an award-winning journalist and an author specializing in human rights, a former religion writer for the Chicago Tribune and the Associated Press. Her news and feature stories and op-eds have appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, Miami Herald, the Plain Dealer, The Nation, Time, Life, Miss, Fortune, American Health, American Photo, Harvard Business Review, Harvard Divinity Bulletin, and Agni Literary Review. Her upcoming book, Weaving Some Mystery, A Gringa Finds a Home in a Maya Family, is a memoir about a restless journalist who finds new meaning and an enduring relationship with the Maya family of weavers in a Guatemalan village. I have a feeling she's right there now. Lieblich earned a master's degree in theological studies at Harvard Divinity School with an emphasis on social justice. Later, as a research fellow at Northwestern Law School Center for International Human Rights, She traveled to Afghanistan and Sierra Leone to write about survivors of war trauma. In 2016, she was a visiting writer at the Center for Mesoamerican Studies in Antigua, Guatemala, where she had access to the war archives. Today, she's a fellow at University of Southern California Center for Religion and Civic Culture, a scholar in residence at the Newberry Library, and an Ockberg Fellow at Columbia's University's Dart Center for Journalists who Cover Trauma. And I want to share with you a brief message from her. And let me reshare my screen to ensure that I shared with sound, because I make that mistake sometimes with Zoom. And I'm gonna wait for a second for this to upload. And this is Julia's message for your contestant participants.
Hi, I'm Julia Lieblich, and I so wish I could be with you today. I'm actually, by the time you see this video, I'll be in a Guatemalan village without the internet, so I'm recording this beforehand. And I want you to know how honored I am to have been able to read your writings about the immigrant experience and see your painting. I was very moved by your stories of intergenerational trauma, memories of your homeland and relatives who are dear to you, the scars of prejudice, the trauma of loss, and many other subjects. I'm very glad my comments will be read aloud, and I'm just very grateful to have been part of this experience, and I wish you all a rich and fruitful day. Bye-bye.
Great. So I hope that you were able to hear her message well enough. I will be sending that via email to our contestants as well. And without further ado, I will begin the presentation of awards. If you are saying something in chat, please, I'm gonna ask Mihaela to please help me out with this, because I won't see the chat for the next couple of slides or so. But here we are, yay. And the winners are, so first time live, we are announcing the winners of Archer's Telling Our Immigrant Stories contest in 5 categories. We have 4 categories that made it here today. We have poetry, the first category, and the winners are, drum roll, first place is taken by The Somber Blood I Carry by Rose Pearlswig. We're gonna hear in a minute from, I'm gonna ask the winners to share their work with us in a second, but let me first announce everybody. The second place has been taken by Sarmale by Dana Seria. Third place has been taken by, drum roll, My Grandmother's Hands by Dana Seria. And we have an honorable mention taken by The Things We Would Prefer to Forget, lowercase t is correct, by Vaidehi Bardwaj. So I want to share with you what our judge had to say about each of these winning entries, but I would also love to ask from each of the winners if they wanted to unmute themselves and share their work with us, if they are here still online with us. So of the first prize recipient, the poem titled The Somber Blood I Carry, the judge's comments are, this powerful poem viscerally describes the experience of intergenerational trauma that leaves heartbreak in its wake. The line, maybe I am the weak link, is a gut punch to the reader, a reminder that some pain feels too strong to survive. And yet, the very act of writing this poem is a testimony to resiliency. So this was the judge on the winning entry, The Somber Blood I Carry. Rose, are you here with us today? Would you mind sharing your poem with us? something in the chat. Okay, so I'm not sure that we have Rose Pearlswig with us today. I'll share just a couple of lines. And I just wanted to say that all these entries will be published on the Archers website and our social media platforms as well, particularly Facebook. Somebody needs to be admitted. Okay, so let me give you a snippet of the somber blood I carry. Hereditary depression. I believe it's all genetic. I think it's been passed down lifeline to lifeline until one little link has all the pain the genes can carry. I have that gene. It cannot be removed. It's too deep in the brain and too bound to the blood. Perhaps I am just weak. Maybe I am the weak link. I am the gene that could not hold 100 years of pain. I am the one who collapsed under its weight. This sadness was a long time coming, from the slaughter of a nation to the camps of nightmare and horror. This sadness is not just my own. Tell me you understand this was not a choice, but an inborn burden. I was born in the gray. I was born hurt and numb. There are numbers on my arm. They have been counting us since day one. It's our heritage to be scared. And I'll stop here. Second place taken by Sarmale, written by Dana Seria. The judge says this about Sarmale: a beautiful poem full of the imagery of preparing food and remembering. Quote, I dip into the juice soaking the ocean between us, captures a grandmother and a granddaughter separated by a sea, but united by aromas and voices, a relationship that can survive time and distance. So let's see if Dana is with us today.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi, great to have you here and congratulations, Dana. Would you please share the first poem with us?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sarmale. Grandma's wrinkled hands fold over my fingers. Like this, she says, scooping the minced meat and placing it on the grape leaf, cradling it like a newborn. Her bony index finger rolls the mixture, then tucks in the edges to seal it. She gives me a toothy grin, then picks up a new leaf from the jar. Tell me a story, I whisper. She places the stuffed grape leaf into the pot, then wipes her hands on a napkin. Once there lived a grandmother and a granddaughter who were separated by sea, but they were always close. In the tiny cottage, her voice fills my ears, and the stars lean in to listen. The sound of Christmas carols rings through the kitchen. Can you hand me another grape leaf, Mom asks. I sift through the jar and weave out a wet leaf. I continue where I left off, the dollop of meat mixture nestled between my thumbs. Fold, roll, then tuck. Grandma's voice flows into my thoughts. Mom places the kettle on the stove, and the familiar scent flutters through our house. I sit down at the dinner table in front of my steaming bowl of sarmale, my lips hovering over the stuffed grape leaf. The aroma tingles my nose, and I wonder, how is Grandma doing? Is she also eating sarmale and thinking of me? Does she miss me as much as I miss her? I dip my bread into the juice, soaking in the ocean between us. Thank you.
Wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much, Dana. I forgot to mention that all the entries were judged blind. So congratulations for you and congratulations for also being the recipient of the third place, My Grandmother's Hands, of which the judge has to say the following. A skillfully rendered poem about a woman who will forever touch your life. The first line is particularly evocative. Quote, the Danube River flows from her veins. End of quote. I see the calloused palms that braid your hair, sprinkle caraway seeds, make dresses in the colors of zinnias, and touch you from afar. Donna, would you please share your second poem with us as well?
Yes. Okay. My grandmother's hands. The Danube River flows from her veins, down callous palms and rigid layers of skin, through fingernails encrusted with soil, her proud warrior scars. Her knuckles are the Carpathian mountains that I climb to reach her beating heart. These are the hands that gently braid my hair, their textured wrinkles folding over my locks, the hands that comb through spring blossoms and whisper lullabies to slumbering lambs. They're the hands that light the fire in the stove and roll out pastry dough, the fingers that brush luscious egg wash and sprinkle pungent caraway seeds. They guide the scissors and needle through fabrics to make dresses in the colors of zinnias. When I leave, they're the hands that wipe my tears, a soft touch that caresses our last embrace. Each summer, I ask my grandmother to hold my hand, even when we're far apart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna, and congratulations once more. We also have an honorable mention, things you would prefer to forget. Let's see, do we have Vaidehi here with us? Okay, well, this is what the judge has to say about the poem. This poem vividly describes how the memories of home come back to us through sights and smells, and how we can choose to remember or try to forget. Quote, "It sometimes scares me how the air of my chosen country can smell like the one I left behind," end of quote, is a beautiful, revealing line I will never forget. So I'm going to share with you, if Vaidehi's not here, a snippet of this poem and encourage you all to follow us on social media and visit our website for the full publication of the full entries here, there. So the poem is titled Things We Would Prefer to Forget, and it starts like this. "It sometimes scares me how the air of my chosen country can smell like the one I left behind. The smoky sweet aroma of burning yams, the impatient crush of too many ghostly bodies, and the sting of petrol fumes. It makes me wonder if we are really as different as we pretend we are, if we really leave behind as many things as we pretend to, strapped into suitcases and duffel bags. It makes me wonder if there are things we don't like to remember." Thank you so much, Vaidehi. All right. How's everybody doing? Good. I see somebody in the waiting room. I'm going to let them in and we're going to move on then. Please stop me if I'm going too fast. All right. In the fiction categories, we have the following winners. Drum roll. First place is taken by We All Tell Lies by Paul Chukuma. Paul, are you here with us today? This is what the judge had to say about Paul's entry. "A beautifully written and sophisticated story, rich with dramatic scenes, riveting dialogue, and vivid characters and descriptions." Quote, "He was cast in the ways of the whites and the only one among us that wore trousers like the master," end of quote. "You capture Zonga's idealization of whites despite their ugly behavior." Quote, "Not that I have seen any ugly whites, as they're always beautiful," end of quote. And the piece captured his surprise when they failed to live up to his expectations. "I was so engrossed in the story, I didn't want it to end." This is what Julia had to say about the winning entry, first place in fiction. And if Paul is not with us to share a snippet of his short story, I would love to do that on his behalf. And then please, again, follow us on social media and our website, Archer's website, for the full entry. We all tell lies. Manjiza was leading a long line of us to the plantation. On getting to the field, it was all ready for harvest. The field was partitioned into two, one of the hectares for cacao, the other for cereals. The male amongst us was in charge of harvesting, while the females carry the filled basket to the waiting cart. On this day, Manjiza assigned me and Nicheza to work in the cacao farm. Ruben Maniksa, nicknamed the Snitch Magi, was the head of us all. He was vast in the ways of the whites and the only one among us that wore trousers like the master. He even has a cloak hung in his sitting room that was fondled by the master, and he wore a flappy white shirt with a cream pair of trousers. After he was done with his instructions, he took his seat underneath a shade and brought out his snuff box. His eyes felt the sting. As the days wore on, I was startled when someone said, "Good morning, Zonga." "Oh, good morning, Mitsmu, my love. How are you doing?" I responded as I turned towards her. Her response was drowned by her puff as she tried to carry a basket filled with cocoa a few feet away from me. And I will stop here and leave you in the suspense and wanting more. An amazing, amazing story by Paul Chukuma. I invite you all to follow us to learn more. The next place, second place in fiction, goes to, drum roll, The Price of a Life. And this author chose to go by a name composed of some initials, DNEQ. And the entry, A Price of Life, of this entry, the judge has to say the following. This is a story that seemed simple and straightforward. A gathering of friends indulging in teasing and sharing the accomplishments of their family members at a reunion. The dialogue is realistic and charming. A wife does not embarrass her husband in front of other husbands. That's a quote from the story. Then the announcement of a young man's death changes the mood of the party and the story. But after a moment of acknowledging the most profound of losses, the party continues, as does life, skillfully rendered. Okay, so let's see, is DN with us today? I'm so sorry, I have to open my bedroom room for my cat. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have the writer with us today. So again, I will share a snippet of the story and invite you to follow us for more. The story begins like this. Two men were standing in the street. People were walking past them. One of them often looked at his watch. Stop looking at your watch all the time. There is time. They're not late. Calm down. Fine, barely answered the second. Another man, whose name was Cum, took out a cigarette from his pocket. Do you want a cigarette? No, thanks. Stop smoking. I feel fed up already, answered the second. He lit the cigarette and took a deep breath as if he wanted to smoke the cigarette all at once. How long can we wait? I don't know. I smoke. If they don't come in a minute, I'm leaving. Cum looked at his friend strangely, as if to say, you won't do it. His friend looked around and saw those who should have come. Look, there they are, he said. Again, I'll stop here and keep you wanting, hopefully, for more. Please follow us on our media. All right, so this was the fiction category. We do not have a third prize or an honorable mention for this, or place, not prize. The winners in the essay category are, drum roll, the first place goes to The Immigrant by Dana Seria. Dana, I will invite you to give us a snippet of that as well. But I want to, actually, why don't you go ahead and read us the essay? But I wanted to share with you what the judge had to say about your piece. In this essay, you skillfully capture an unfamiliar world, a grocery store with hundreds of spices and brands of coffee, and a man who feels helpless because he cannot ask in English for the bread that tastes like home on his tongue. The metaphor of English as a wide river is vivid and powerful. The ending is particularly beautiful as your father learns to mouth the words in a new language. So thank you so much, Dana. I know you're online with us. I cannot really see you, but I would love for you to please share your essay with us.
Okay, should I read the whole thing?
Why not? Yeah, it's not long. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Immigrant. He arrives to JFK, luggage and passport in hand. This is a new world, a river spiraling with millions of people flowing into the ocean. He sinks on the bottom of the Manhattan streets, dizzy from the blinding lights and deafening sounds. He's looking for a job, but doesn't know where to find it. He walks into a grocery store, amazed by the hundreds of spices and brands of coffee. He watches a mother pushing her crying child's stroller while she looks for tomato sauce. An elderly man's coat nudges his shoulder, rushing to checkout. He trips over his own feet as he stares at the aisles packed with food. More people shove past him with their crumpled lists. Another man bumps into him, yelling, "Move out of the way." He stares at the man in confusion, but before he could open his lips, the man dashes to the condiments aisle. His eyes glaze over the endless strands of fruit, glimmering with berries, apples, and oranges. His fingers brush over the delicate tangerines. He steps closer and takes in a waft of their cool citrus scent. He realizes he doesn't know how to ask for bread, for the bread aisle. He doesn't know how to ask for anything. He doesn't know how to say bread. He uses his hands, trying to communicate by pointing fingers. He feels helpless and ashamed. Where is the pline? Bread in America is never the same as in Romania. Good bread is rare and tastes like home on the tongue. You can only find it in special bakeries, not in the supermarket. But he doesn't know that yet. And after tasting good bread, you're thirsty for water, but even the water is not the same. English is a wide river. He was thrown into it, and now he must endure the currents of language. Each day he's drowning, gasping for air. He's alone in the most crowded body of water. For him, Romanian is a gentle stream. In his old language, he has full control, but not here, not yet. I imagine him trying to navigate through this new life. He doesn't know how to say, "How do I get home?" He has a thick, incomprehensible accent, slowly floating in the rapids. He struggles to shape words in his mouth, rolling consonants on his tongue, choking on simple sounds, and learning how to get from pline to bread, from apa to water. At the evening school of English as a second language, he sits next to people from different continents, uttering wa, ta, bra, ed, like small children. A boy and a toy, they repeat, a cat and a mat, a dog and a frog. He wants to make a joke, but his words drown in silence. How does he start swimming? He first flings his arms, self-conscious and afraid of being pulled under. Then he discovers he can float, his feet rising to the surface. He takes his first stroke, then the next, until he feels the flow of the waves carrying him. He slowly says, "Nice to meet you. Water, water. He's my father, swimming in the English language in the United States." Thank you.
Wow, this was great. Thank you so much, Dana, for sharing that with us. Beautiful, beautiful writing. Please write your comments and send us your hearts in the chat. Moving on to the second place, we have, if I'm clicking on the right thing, second place goes to drum roll, Some Miles Across the Sea by Sanya Polo. I see, Sanya, that you're here with us. Let me share very quickly with the audience what the judge had to say about your piece, and then we'd love to hear it from you. Judge's comments: I will remain haunted by these lines, she says. One where for the first time I no longer wanted my ancestry. I no longer wanted the dark shades of my skin and the curl of my coils. I no longer wanted my queso frito and Mark Anthony playlist. I didn't want my car's Jamaican flag and my grandmother's oxtails. I wanted none of it, nothing that could hint to the rest of America that I was other. Because that summer, I had a revelation. I cannot live the American dream if I'm dead. Sadly, Julia says, you capture a brutal coming of age when a young man understands that his very skin can put him in danger. I'm glad that you are shouting. You need to be heard, and this essay needs to be read. Sanya, congratulations, and please come off mute and share your wonderful essay with us.
Hi, thank you. So my essay is called Some Miles Across the Sea. My father said that the boat was cold. His mother held him closer. Her hijo, her baby, was trembling with every ripple against the waves. The Dominican Republic is 1,997 miles away from the center of the US, but I live in North Carolina, only 1,294 miles away from the Dominican Republic. Only 1,000 miles away from the history of my ancestry and the whirling bodies of my lineage. Before I was born, my father taught me Spanish. He would call out to me as I dwelt within the belly of my mother with whispers of the life he would give me. Life in America, life with the American dream. And then, when I was 8, I saw Trayvon Martin's body on my living room TV. And I couldn't understand why my mother and father and brothers were crying, but I cried too. It was years later, with the images of George Floyd's body engulfing like the raging flowers found in California, any screen that my gaze was unlucky enough to meet. That's when I cried alone, because I understood. I spent the summer before I began applying to college inside my home, hiding away from a biomedical virus, only to be trapped inside with another pandemic, one spreading quick and fierce throughout society, one where, for the first time, I no longer wanted my ancestry. I no longer wanted the dark shades of my skin and the curl of my coils. I no longer wanted my queso frito and Mark Anthony playlist. I don't want my car's Jamaican flag and my grandmother's oxtails. I wanted none of it. Nothing that could hint to the rest of America that I was other. Because that summer I had a revelation. I cannot live the American dream if I'm dead. I won't get a dream job and a millionaire husband if I'm dead. In fact, I get nothing but a mourning country and a broadcasted funeral. So take it all, everything that makes me who I am. Take the whirling bodies of the sea and the plastered names in the papers. Cut away my rolling tongue and set my skin aflame if you must. Because I must live. I must live because those that were on the boat didn't. Because if I die, it would have all been for nothing. So I must, I will. So I must, I weep. So I must, I scream. Do they hear me? Do you?
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Sanya, for sharing that with us. Look at the amazing applause and the hearts that you've got in the audience. I'm sure that the Facebook Live audience is also mesmerized by all your beautiful writing. Thank you so much. And the third place in this category of essay goes to, all right, we have Black Lives Matter by Paul Okparaibo Chukuma. And I wanted to invite Paul, as we say in Romanian, but Paul, if he is here to share his essay with us. But I don't think he is. So I'm going to just jump ahead and share with you what the judge said of this essay and then offer you a snippet. A well-researched and passionate essay that raises the central question, Does writing a counterfeit check, stealing a phone, or holding a knife justify the taking of a life? As you say, it only leads to pain, regret, loneliness, and bitterness, and more killing in the name of vengeance. This is what the judge, our judge Julia, had to say about this beautiful essay. I will give you a snippet of it, but I invite you to read more on our social media platforms and our website. But this is, unless Paul is here and I'm not seeing. Seeing that, but I will offer you a snippet otherwise. Here we go. I cannot really see the people, the participants. So if you're here, Paul, please feel free to unmute yourself and share with us. But if you are not, I'm happy to do that. All right, here we go. Do you think so? Or should I just call it another aphorism used to soothe a crying child from his usual sporadic tantrums? The word black, is it only restricted to the skin color? Of course not. Any sojourner immigrant is a black as long as his foot is not in his homeland. Black is the world over, is smeared with daily threats, humiliation, pain, hatred, discrimination, and even murder. But why? Humans with like immodest organs thrust their counterparts to dehumanizing treatments, all in the name of he is colored, or oh, he is not one of us. Who says we must have the same skin tone, voice, agility, physicality, sexuality, height, hair, color of lips, or even fingernails for us to live together? If it was to be a must, why do brothers and sisters do not have the same fingerprint? All we see is mass injustice hidden in disguise of immigration credentials. According to data collected by the Washington Post, police shot and killed at least 1,055 people nationwide last year in 2021, the most since the newspaper began tracking fatal shootings by officers in 2015. That is more than the 1,021 shootings in 2020 and the 999 in 2019. Black people, who account for 13% of the US population, accounted for 27% of those fatally shot and killed by the police in 2021, according to Mapping Police Violence, a nonprofit group that tracks police shootings. That means Black people are twice as likely as white people to be shot and killed by police officers. From this stat, it can be inferred that some groups are not needed. But when Serena Williams wins the Grand Slam, the whole of America rejoices. When Lewis Hamilton wins the Formula One for World Driving Championship, the world of Britain rejoices. Or LeBron James soars to win the final point that secures the Olympic gold medal, the whole of America rejoices. It shows that at that moment of sincerity, nothing matters, no distinction. We all become one. I'll stop here. And I have somebody waiting to enter in the waiting room. I'll stop here, and I encourage you to please go and read the entire piece that will be soon posted on our social media and on Archer's website. Thank you for that. Thank you, Paul. We still have one more word in this category, an honorable mention. And this goes to, drum roll, My Non-Typical Immigrant Story by Belen Garcia Vasquez. Belen, I think I saw you here among us. Am I right? Am I seeing that rightly or not? Maybe not anymore, but thank you, Belen, for joining us. I wanted to share the judge's comment about your piece, a compelling essay about how life can change in an instant. One moment, your 23-year-old brother was a happy young man full of plans for the future. Suddenly, he was in bed fighting for his life. You honor your brother by telling both your stories, and I cannot help think how lucky he is to have such a sensitive, caring sibling to help him navigate this life. And because Belen is no longer with us here, I would also share a snippet of this essay and invite you to follow us to read it all. The essay, My Non-Typical Immigrant Story, starts like this. My brother once told me that the process will be long, but not impossible. And from that moment, this phrase has marked me for life because I had to understand it from a very early age and above all to put it into practice. My name is Belen Garcia Vasquez. I was born in Veracruz, Mexico, and I currently live in Denver, Colorado for 6 years. I'm the youngest of 3 children, Miguel and Israel, and I can say that despite being the youngest with 9 and 5 years difference respectively, I'm very close to my family, especially my brothers, despite the conditions. At the age of 13, I emigrated to the United States, and coincidentally, it was not for the most common reasons, better known as the American dream, but because my old brother Miguel suffered an accident, an electric shock that in anyone's ears is immediate death. However, my brother's case was peculiar because he survived after almost a month in a coma, 3 microinfarcts in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, and many ice beds to reduce the swelling in his body that the electricity had caused. This tragedy forced me and my whole family to leave everything in Mexico to get here. Without a doubt, at age 13, it was a hard blow. Firstly, the fact of having to be the one who broke the bad news to the rest of my family in Mexico while my parents were still traveling, with the uncertainty of whether my brother would survive or not. The weeks and months after the accident felt strange because I still had to continue with my normal life, go to school, all the same time taking care of the business that my parents had just started, and in which there was a lot of investment, both monetary and time. I will stop here. I hope I made you curious. There's a lot more very interesting things happening in this essay that Belen is narrating for us. So I encourage you to follow us online. Okay. And we have one more category that made it, and that is visual arts. And the winner in this category, we only have one winning entry. Drum roll. First place, we have single entry by Isabel Rizzo. And the judges' comments for you, Isabel, go as follows. This is a beautiful and elegant design full of evocative imagery that brings to mind music and celebration, peace and harmony. Thank you so much for your artwork. If it's okay with you, I'd love to share it here with our participants. And because I've got nothing to read, I would love to invite you to say a few words about it, Isabel.
Thank you so much. Yes, and thank you so much for the feedback from the judges too, because I've been trying for the longest time to use like the traditional motifs on the ie, and how can I bring that magic and storytelling that comes from the elegance of the ie, but to a Western audience, which is why I brought up the questions to Dominika and Anna about bringing things to the audience. So hearing the adjectives that the judges used, it feels very affirming. So I'm going to be continuing this as a series moving forward. So thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And for those of our audience members who are not familiar with the term ie, it is a Romanian word that stands for the traditional peasant blouse worn by both men and women in the traditional Romanian society, which is stitched, right, with very intricate folk motifs that are mirrored right here in Isabel's entry. Thank you so much, and congratulations to everybody. Let's give them a round of Zoom applause. right? I don't know if we can do that actually, or we can use the emojis that Zoom allow us, cheering for all of you. Anna says that she's embroidering one right now. Congratulations. Wow, this is chilling. Wow. The comments are absolutely stunning and wonderful. Thank you, everybody. But we are not over yet. We do want to say thank you for all the entrants in our contest. We read all your entries carefully with much love. We were very impressed. We wish we could award everybody something, but you know, funds are limited. However, we want to do one more thing between we part today, and that is a raffle. And here's the surprise that I mentioned earlier. This is what we have as a raffle award for 2 winners. We're going to be choosing these winners from among the people who submitted to the contest but didn't win any monetary prize. So just to remind everybody, Archer is delighted to be able to offer a monetary prize for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd places in each of the 4 awarded categories. So we're going to be using everybody else, including the honorable mentions, because they do not receive a monetary prize. For this raffle, we're going to draw 2 names, and each of those 2 names is going to receive 2 of the books and the audio collection that you're seeing advertised right here on the screen. These are the works of the speakers and the artists that we've heard today. We want you to become familiar with their work. We highly encourage the entire audience to please check their work out. It's the work of passion and caring, the work of love, the work also of trauma and of hurt. And it's very healing, right, to imbue into this. So in order to do the raffle, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reshare my screen with a raffle online, I don't know what to call it, thing that you can use. To continue for drawing out these names. This is a random wheel of names. Here we go. We've already entered the names of the participants who were not able to win a monetary prize, and see who gets a couple of the items featured, made and written by our invited guests. The first person is woohoo, Simeon! There's something in the chat. Yes, Mihaela says, please everyone support Archer and all the participants in today's event. And you can do that in a couple of ways, but most importantly, please follow us on social media, and please follow to read all the entries and see all the entries, the winning entries in this beautiful contest. And please follow us for our next year's iteration of this event. So the first name, it belongs to Simeon. The second, okay. So this is that. We have messages of appreciation coming in for all contest entrants. Please look out for an email from me with further details about how to receive your prizes and to get the beautiful handout that Alina Ștefănescu put together for us, and other wonderful and useful resources. All right, not quite done yet. I'll keep you just a couple of minutes more. And I want to share my screen again just for a little bit. Here we go for my concluding remarks and thank yous. Everybody Really, thank you so much. We've been asking these questions as we moved along, so I really appreciate your contributions and your thoughts and your words of encouragement and of praise. We absolutely need that. We are a community that relies on the support that comes from one another as artists, as scholars, as writers, as immigrants, as humans, right? With a diverse cast of identities and histories and memories and traumas, but also joys and exhilarating moments. I wanted to thank once again to the Romanian United Fund for making this possible with their matching donation to your efforts. Also to thank you, the audience, for donating to Archer in preparation of this event. Without you, we would not have been able to offer the wonderful prizes that we have. And I also wanted to say thank you to my Archer team. I have a few people pictured here. I have Mihaela Campion, our president, Crina Taraș, and Rareș Moșteanu, who have helped with, creating posters and announcements online for this event. But I also want to recognize Alina Simpetru, Calvin Mao, here with us today, Andrea Mile, maybe you can see my notes here, Andrea Motram, Marie-Louise Paulescu, and Cristina Bejan, who was also here, great supporters of Archer, a great team who have helped with distributing the announcements, the call for submissions for our contest, the announcement about today's event online, and we just could not have done it without them. I really, really appreciate everything that you have done and put to words, making this symposium happen and a reality. And most of all, I really appreciate your time. We are 5 minutes over what we had actually planned. So I think that's a really great way of staying on time, even if we're 5 minutes over. I appreciate everybody. I thank everybody. And without further ado, I conclude today's symposium. I'm going to stop the live feed here and the recording.